Good evening, members, officers, visitors and members of the public. I'm Councillor Mike Baldock and I'll be chairing this evening's meeting. The meeting will be recorded and proceedings will be conducted in accordance with the Council's constitution, including procedural rules which are available on the Council's website. Item 1, emergency evacuation procedure. There is no planned evacuation drill this evening and accordingly, if the alarm sounds, it is to be treated as a genuine need to evacuate. There are emergency exits there and opposite the lift where you came in. On exiting, you will be directed to the assembly point, and it is important that you remain there and do not return to the building until I have announced that it is safe to do so. If anyone present needs assistance in evacuating, could you please inform me now so that we can make necessary arrangements to assist you. Members must consider each application and everything that is said in the meeting concerning the application and make their decision based solely on their planning judgment of the information available to them. Following a decision by members, delegated authority is given to the planning officer to issue the decision notice. Planning permission is not granted or refused until the issue of that decision notice. Council who is not a member of the planning committee may attend as a visiting member and may speak having given prior notification. Any member acting as a substitute on the planning committee must have undertaken appropriate training. Members must remain in the meeting for the whole time that each item is being debated and should not vote on that item unless they have done so. I would now like to welcome our public speakers and remind you that you have 3 minutes to speak and an audible warning of time will be given when there are 30 seconds remaining. If the meeting is deferred to conduct a site meeting, you may speak both at this meeting and at the site meeting, but there will be no further opportunity to speak on the matter when it comes back to the planning committee. I think that needs looking at in the constitution for the future. The meeting will not follow the order set out. Right. Okay. The committee of information, we have been told we may, due to the BT, I think is cutting the roads up again, we may lose internet connection. So I'll be taking those who are speaking remotely first. But first we have apologies for absence.
Chair, apologies have been received from Councillor Terry Thompson, from Councillor Charlie Miller, who is substituted by Councillor Angela Harrison, from Councillor Elliot James, who is substituted by Councillor Lonnie Bonny, from Councillor James Hall, who is substituted by Councillor Chris Palmer. Thank you.
Okay. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do members have any members have disclosable pecuniary interests to declare? Councillor Bonny, this is disclosable pecuniary interests first. Okay, which one?
2.3. This is fashion. It is the land at Station Road. I'm a cabinet member, and then subsequently I chair regeneration and property. It falls within my portfolio. I feel I should leave it.
Okay.
Having judgments.
Okay, and any non-pecuniary interests? Councillor Palmer? Chris Palmer?
Yes, I'm going to be speaking about the school owner.
Okay, anybody else? And any other disclosable interests? Okay, as I said, we are going to have to deviate a bit from the agenda tonight. So the first item I'll take is 2.2. Which is the stables at Rushet Lane, Norton, and I believe we have so many bits of paper today. Okay, so I ask the officer if there is any summary and update.
Update, sorry, bear with me a second. This is like hello. Hello. It's just loading up.
Sit down now.
Sorry about that. So yeah, just to reiterate, there's no update for this one, so report as is written. The applications for the proposed change of use of an existing commercial building to a single unit of holiday accommodation with parking, turning space, amenity space and landscaping. Overview of the scheme. So here's an aerial shot of the site and the surrounding areas, and it's this unit on that building here, which is just off Rushford Lane, which is this one here. In terms of the site location plan, so the site in red includes the building, some amenity space around it, parking space, the access onto Rushford Lane, and then the blue line's what is also in the applicant's ownership. And that includes essentially some stables and a paddock area for horses. But plan is largely the same, except that we have this garden area marked out here to serve the holiday let. 2 parking spaces are located here. Floor area of the unit, proposed floor area shows 2 bedrooms, lounge, kitchen, and a WC and an ensuite there. And an ensuite there. The elevations of the building, and there's no proposed changes to the elevations. They are as they currently are, which I'll show you shortly in photographic form. It currently stands. Yeah, from the other side, that's standing in front of the access into the site. Wider view of the site, that essentially takes in that land within the blue line, which I showed earlier. That's going backwards towards the access onto Rushford Lane. There are the parking spaces for the unit. The building is just to the right of that picture there, you just see the edge of the roof. So in summary, the recommendation is for approval for the reasons set out in the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I ask Parish Councillor Twym to speak on behalf of Norton Parish Council, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, councillors. This application concerns a somewhat remote site in Rushwick Lane, as you see. The history is that the building, which is the subject of this application, started life as a stable, part finished, when it was declared a redundant agricultural building. Since then, there have been a series of planning applications which have moved the building from stables with hay stores and tack room through workshop with office to office with living accommodation to currently all living accommodation. At some point in this series, the applicant moved into the building. The last application, which was refused and went to appeal, was for part residential and part B1 use, the applicant having occupied the property for some time. The application was rejected, as was the appeal. An enforcement notice was issued and enacted. The now current application seeks to convert the building into a holiday let. However, it is exactly the same building as was rejected by the inspector, partly on the grounds that the windows and doors that have inserted give the building domestic appearance. Moreover, despite the existing vegetation, which partially screens the site, the residential use with its private garden area and domestic paraphernalia and associated parking has changed the rural character and appearance of the site to a harmful degree. Norton Buckland and Stone Parish Council fails to appreciate how the change of use from domestic and B1 to holiday let actually influences that. The applicant states that the interior layout is already structured for domestic use and little work is required to convert to the new use. The internal layout is key to this. I can find no successful planning application which features the now existing layout. The last approving floor plan seems to be that of the 2014 application for a workshop and office. Finally, the office is confident that the proposed petition on the limitation of time restraints can readily be monitored and enforced. I'm afraid Norton Buckland and Stone Parish Council does not share this confidence. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Well timed. Okay, I'll move you off to the recommendation. Does anybody wish to speak on this? Ask any questions? Well, yeah, I need a seconder. Is that seconding, Tony? Councillor Winkler. Thanks. I think first comes Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chairman. Can we have, please, officers' comments with regards to the statement made by the parish, the items as detailed on page 22 under refusal of planning application 19504418 and refusal ditto second item and third item, just really to substantiate where we are, Mr. Chairman, versus what we just heard from the parish council.
Well, I was going to say, so that's good. Paul?
Yeah, sure. In terms of the refusal under 19504418, that was for conversion to part residential, and the inspector essentially took the view that it would be fully residential, the property. And what we've got in that scenario is we've got a new dwelling in the countryside, which there are sort of, there's a general presumption against in policy terms. Now, what we've got here is a application for commercial building because it's never been approved for a residential unit. So we've taken enforcement action against that. The enforcement notice was upheld. So it's never been approved for a residential unit. But what we do have is policies which essentially support the conversion of rural buildings to holiday lets. So the weight to be given to the benefits of that far outweigh what we consider to be much more limited harm in terms of the impact on the character of the countryside. The other thing to note in terms of the previous applications for residential use are that the site location plan was drawn much wider, and the inspector found that there would be likely harm caused by residential paraphernalia in the amenity space, such as garden chairs, parasols, washing lines, etc. The red line on this is much tighter, so there's a much smaller amenity area. And also, I think in terms of holiday lets, you're much less likely to get things to add to the list, things like trampolines, which are more likely to get for a residential use. So that's the reason why we've come to in terms of conclusion here, because essentially there's the scheme's different and the weight to be given to the benefits of this scheme very different to the weight to be given to a residential use in the countryside.
Thank you. I'm following up on that because it was a similar issue I wanted to clarify. The appeal says the windows and doors that have been inserted give the building a domestic appearance. So A, have they changed? B, residential use with private garden area and domestic paraphernalia and associated parking has changed the rural character. When you mentioned play equipment and trampolines. I am of the mind that when I've seen these residential areas, holiday homes, they're full of turf. And they might not be permanent turf, but they're pretty regular turf, especially when they bring children. So, I mean, how does that differ?
Those indoors are the same, and it's accepted there's a, it gives a residential appearance because it's a holiday let and it's going to be used as a residential unit, but restricted, albeit by that condition, which means that people obviously can't stay there permanently. So that's part of what I was just saying in terms of weighing that in the balance and how the harmful impact of that is lessened against the benefits of the holiday let. There's also a bit of commentary in the report about those windows and doors, and on the basis of the lawful commercial use, the building's got a lawful commercial use, and on that basis, it's likely that the insertion of windows and doors, if it was being used as a commercial use, would be permitted development in any case. So that's the reasoning behind where we got to the recommendation.
Okay, so we shouldn't rely too much on inspectors. I think Councillor Bonney.
Sorry, I was indicating to second, I think, so go to Councillor.
Councillor Winkliff.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the officers actually clarified on the main points. I was concerned about the difference between being living accommodation and being a holiday let. If we're mindful to pass this tonight, another parts of the, I think we must have a strict condition, but it won't be a condition, but a condition put on that it is only going to be a holiday. Doesn't end up people living there. And the other point is, I think once the term is down, it could fall into a state of disrepair.
Let's point out condition 3, the holiday let hereby permitted shall be used solely for the purpose of holiday accommodation.
Thanks for that clarification.
Councillor Bonney.
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, I should actually declare I've got a couple of holiday lets, but that doesn't cloud my judgment on this. So I should make that declaration. However, I think when these have come up before in committee, there's been a business case assessment. Has there been a business case assessment?
No, you're possibly referring to the situation where we've got a new build of a day let, and that's where we've required one.
Right.
For a conversion, there's no policy requirement for that.
No policy.
Would you like to come back, Councillor Bonney?
Sorry, Chair. No, that answered my question. Thank you.
Councillor Marchington.
Thank you, Chair. In the past, when people have applied to do holiday lets, we've actually requested that they survey the situation or obtain information to prove it would be successful before we will give permission.
Same response to my last question. Actually, it's when it's a new build, we would seek that as part of the consideration. But in this case, obviously, you've got existing building, which is why one of the reasons why we don't. And there's no policy requirement for it.
Councillor Booth.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to come back, Chairman. The only point I would make is we just need to be erring on the side of caution, and we refer back to page 25, item 3 on the conditions. We're aware of the limited enforcement that Swale currently has, and I would suggest that the last line of that is not going to be enforceable, where it says not to be occupied by a person or group of persons 4 weeks in any calendar year. Mr. Chairman, this is a business, and they will be full accommodation for 52 weeks a year, I would suggest. If Mr. and Mrs. Miggins choose to go 4 weeks out of 52, how is that going to be enforced?
I would add to that, It's not unknown for people to spend 3 weeks in the summer and then go back to the same place for 3 weeks over Christmas. How do we enforce that? Well,
Just if we had a complaint regarding that potentially taking place, then we could ask the owners for the bookings over that period of time. That would be well, to provide some clarity on that.
So when Councillor Booth and Councillor Hunt and I go for a lashing in summer and I book it, then Councillor Booth books it in the winter, we're not going to know, are we? Unless people use the same names.
Mr. Chairman, I object. I'm not going to share a holiday accommodation with you, with respect.
That's why they were lashings.
This is to add to what I've just said. This is the standard condition that goes essentially on holiday accommodation. It's not bespoke for this one. And I say, I mean, if for example, say there was a complaint regarding that, then first we'd have to assess whether that person had done it, and then assess whether there was harm arising from that.
Okay, Councillor Henderson.
I'm really following up the point that several people have made. A friend of mine has a holiday let in the garden of their main house, and quite frequently used by mobile contractors coming to work at the paper mill or an engineering company or whatever. And if anybody seriously thinks that we can implement condition 3, then let's be sensible. I'm not sure I would want to turn this down, but we're going to approve it, then let's approve it recognising that the likelihood of being able to control condition 3 is very slender.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just one question, really for clarification. If it was difficult to monitor and enforce previously, what's actually changed?
I don't think it has been difficult to monitor and enforce. We've taken enforcement action previously, and the enforcement notice has been upheld. So I think we've, despite previous comments, I think we've got a fairly good track record of enforcement on this site so far.
Yeah, just for clarification again, it may be that I'm misunderstanding it, because reference to when it was rejected previously, it mentioned that the council considers that such a condition will be difficult to monitor and enforce.
Sorry, where's that? Where are you reading that? Oh, I'm sorry. Is that what the parish council was saying?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so that's parish council are of that view, and the response to that is as per the answers that I've just given in terms of that condition. We think it is enforceable.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
If there is unease about condition 3, I've written down, I've just had a suggestion, we could have insert the word consecutive between 4 weeks. So any person or group of persons for more than 4 consecutive weeks in any calendar year. Councillor Booth.
Chairman, I'd go one further and just delete that certain part of the condition. The key here is that we don't want to use as continuous residential or sole or main residence, as is throughout this borough. holiday accommodation, people take the mickey like it's going out of fashion. So I would suggest, I'm happy with the first part, but we don't keep it as a sole or main residence, and strike the second part about duration in the calendar year.
Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, I think complicating it. Start saying that it's not a main residence. Somebody could easily say, oh yeah, I'm living here, but I've got another main residence somewhere and stay somewhere else. It just gets complicated. I think if you're going to do it, it doesn't matter whether it's 4 weeks, 6 months. It'll be the same difficulty in doing any enforcement. I think 4 weeks covers it. You can easily go in and check on who's been in there. If they don't, the owner doesn't work with the council in that, then that's enforcement action can then start being taken. But I think it's just complicated. It should be left as it is.
A condition that would include a requirement that a logbook is maintained, which at the moment we wouldn't have to do. I'll put those two to the committee, that we include in the condition that a logbook has to be maintained and that we add the word consecutive so that it reads more than 4 consecutive weeks in any calendar year. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bonnie, Councillor Henderson, do you want to speak on this?
Yeah, please. I'd be very happy to add the logbook or rent book or whatever you call it, but I don't think an agreement for no more than 4 consecutive weeks is worth putting in. I think I was simply raising the point that enforcement will be difficult, suggesting that we don't include it. So I would suggest let's have the logbook, but let's leave the 4 consecutive weeks.
Okay, we'll take a vote on together, and then if that falls, we'll take a vote on the logbook on its own. Councillor Bonnie.
4 consecutive weeks actually dovetails with how the tax regime deals with holiday lets. So if they start letting on a regular basis over 4 weeks, they actually lose their tax incentives around it being holiday let, back of it being something else, and will be taxed. So I think the enforcement regime would pick up on that from a planning point of view as well as the tax regime.
Added condition, please indicate.
If I can just add some, just to try and help, the logbook is a bit wishy-washy. I think it would be better to say records of bookings, period of
full records of
3 years. You've got to be clear of what you're actually asking, because a logbook could be anything, but I think something along the lines of records of bookings for a period of 3 years to be held, and then it can always be checked out. But see what's
Andy.
Thank you. Couple of points just to add. I think the biggest issue we have with conditions relating to holiday accommodation is overwhelmingly with caravans, where we have the 8-month and 10-month occupancy periods, which do cause us a lot of problems because it's very difficult to monitor and get evidence that people are or aren't using it as their main home. It's much less of a problem with more conventional holiday accommodation such as this, which tends to have the condition that is outlined in this report. The concern I would have about using the word consecutive is that if somebody uses the premises for 4 weeks, stops using it for a weekend, then starts using it again, are we getting ourselves in a problem there? The third thing I would say is if members are concerned about the 4-week period, they could take the view that actually a 6-week period in any year would be acceptable rather than 4 weeks. It's up to members whether they think that's acceptable. We have always gone on the 4-week basis, and that's the condition that we have used for a number of years in Swale without any real kind of practical issues or any real kickback from applicants, but members do have the ability to extend the number of weeks per year, but I would advise against using the words consecutive.
Anybody else want to comment before we go to the vote?
Sorry, what are we voting
We're
on?
still voting on the 4 weeks unless we get an amendment. Those in favour of the proposed condition of four consecutive weeks and maintained a logbook, please indicate. Still counting. I need to do my counting for me. 40. Those against? 1. I'll do that one. Abstentions? None. Okay, so that condition has been passed by 14 votes in favour, 1 against and no abstentions. So we correct the substantive motion of the recommendation. Anybody still wish to talk? Okay, those in favour of the recommendation, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Unanimous except me then. Okay. That has been passed. Right. The next item we will take is item 3.3. I'll just give everybody time to find it. This is application number 506000. And can the officer give us an update?
Just a point, the officer gives it update on page 53. The application 225021484. I would assume that means the 10th of the 8th, 2022, not 23.
Decision date, yes. That would be looking forward, wouldn't it? Can confirm in officer update include a confirmation that the previous decision was made on the 10th of August 2022, not.
Yeah, apologies. I was trying to multitask then and sort out the presentation as well. But yes, the decision date was the 10th of August 2022. Apologies, that wasn't picked up. There we go. That. There's no update for members on this application. Just for context, Callan Park is located here. This is Lower Howstow here. The built confines are outlined in red. Lower Howstow's here, and you've got Bassett Hill that runs here between Sheerness Road and Highway Road. This application seeks to remove a planning condition on the dwelling at Callan Park, and the condition in question relates to a restriction that requires the occupants to be employed in agriculture. The site itself is located in the open countryside and within an area of high landscape value, in an area where new residential development would normally be restricted. The dwelling was permitted in the 1990s on the basis that there was a clear identified need to support the economy. And the only reason that it was deemed acceptable was with an occupancy was used by persons employed in agriculture. Considering the current application, the key question is whether or not the condition still serves a useful planning purpose. Removing the condition would be essentially to permit an unrestricted open market dwelling in the countryside in a location that would be contrary to development plan policies. And it's common practice with applications to remove or vary a condition like this, to demonstrate whether a need or demand exists for a property, that property is marketed, usually for a minimum period of 6 months, and usually at an appropriate discounted price to reflect the agricultural occupancy condition, which is whether or not there is interest from the local agricultural community. No marketing or independent valuation of the property has taken place or been submitted, and officers have raised significant concern that the application fails to evidence any lack of demand or lack of affordability for persons who would comply with the condition and could come forward to occupy the premises. The applicants provided their own reasoning why, in their opinion, the condition should be removed. However, officers don't find these arguments to be compelling, and in the absence of any market testing, our recommendation is that the application should be refused.
Thank you. I just mentioned to the committee, agricultural occupancy conditions are something that you may not have come across or very often. I have asked that we have some, it's incorporated in some training going forward, so that we can understand when they do come up. That's what I imagine we're going to hear tonight. Okay. First, I would like to ask Mr. Dane Page, who is supporting the application.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Splendid, thank you. I'll speak to you this evening in support of this application, further to my additional planning statement submitted to the council on the 25th of May. The applicant has estimated the property's current value, subject to the AOC condition, at 1.2 million. As you will have seen from my report earlier, in order to purchase the property at this level, on a relevant mortgage, a farm worker would be required to provide a £480,000 deposit and make almost £5,000 a month repayments. The council, however, contests this market valuation figure of 1.2 million. Therefore, for argument's sake, if we say the property is valued at £800,000, this would still require a deposit of £330,000, generating monthly repayments of £3,300. We see it as highly unlikely that a farm worker would have access to such capital lump sums, as well as having the liquidity to make these monthly repayments, as well as ongoing running costs. Working on a 5-time salary basis, as is usual in these situations, and on this lower figure, this farm worker would have to be on a £94,000 a year salary and would be placed within the 96th percentile of all UK earners, according to the Office of National Statistics report from March this year. I'm sure most will agree that farm workers are highly unlikely to be within the top 4% of paid workers in the country. In relation to a certificate of lawfulness, the applicant has been in breach of this condition for the last 26 years, and we can provide a comprehensive dossier of clear evidence to prove this breach for the necessary 10-year period. With this certificate in place, the value of the property will increase yet further from the examples just provided. Plus, this will then remove the dwelling from the agricultural housing stock available. The certificate will run with the property, and therefore this will allow another non-complying worker other than the applicant to lawfully reside in the property. The council have requested that a marketing exercise is undertaken on the property. However, as a chartered surveyor who deals regularly with rural estate sales such as this, I could not accept such an instruction, as to do so would be in breach of my professional body's code of conduct, as it would be disingenuous to carry out a sales campaign on a property in full knowledge there is no intent in ever selling with it. Marketing the property, therefore, is just not possible. The condition states the dwelling is to be occupied by a local agricultural employee. The chance, therefore, of finding a locally sourced buyer looking for an AOC dwelling in this proximity who could afford the property is clearly well beyond the realms of possibility. It is therefore clear that with the ability for the condition to be made unenforceable through a certificate and the fact that the value of the property is significantly beyond the reach of a complying farm worker, the condition therefore no longer serves any useful purpose, and therefore it is respectfully requested that members please approve our application tonight. Thank you very much for your time and listening.
And can I ask John McGee, the applicant, please?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is John McGee, and together my wife and I own and manage the Callan Park estate. I want to offer a couple of comments on the officer's report, if I may. Firstly, we did offer to supply a valuation in the form of a market appraisal, but this was rejected. Officers wanted a full red book valuation instead, backed up by an expert review. But this would have cost us around £6,000, which just seemed like an overkill, given the obvious value of the house. Secondly, there is no planning requirement, policy requirement, to market a property first. But in any case, we couldn't, because we couldn't establish the terms to do so. Officers insisted that we divorce the house from the entire estate, leaving it disconnected from all services and basically uninhabitable. This also meant the new equine facility, it also made the new equine facility redundant before it even opened, as it has no independent means of access, as you can see from the image that we supplied. We asked many times for clarification on these points, and without this we couldn't proceed, as the house and equine facility are physically dependent. There's another picture. And thirdly, if the officer had sought the advice perhaps of their agricultural expert, which is normal in such circumstances, then they would almost certainly have been informed that the house is considerably larger than that considered to be a farm worker's house. We don't understand why they didn't do this. Convincing an estate agent to market a £1.2 million house without access to utilities, restricted to a local farm worker, and knowing that we had no intention of selling it anyway, is a tall order, to say the least. Essentially, this all boils down to whether you believe that a person employed or last employed locally as a farm worker, that's not a farm owner, but a farm worker, is likely to buy and then maintain this 5,300 square foot house. I don't know any millionaire tractor drivers or shepherds, and I doubt anyone here does either. Hopefully you can see the common sense here above the bureaucracy, and we hope that you feel able to cast your vote in favour of common sense this evening. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I'll move to the recommendations. Any seconder, Councillor Booth. Councillor Hunt.
I'll just ask a question of clarification, and then I'll come back in line. It was said there about market appraisal being offered, and the officers have gone back and said they want it to be on the market for 6 months. We just have clarification of what was asked for and what hasn't been asked.
Andy?
Yeah, so we originally requested that the property should be marketed, and as is usual practice with these types of proposals, that would be for a minimum of 6 months. The applicants contested that on the grounds that their estimation of the property was so far beyond the affordability of somebody employed in agriculture that it would be completely hard to do so. We took the view that whilst the applicant has quoted, and as he has done again tonight, shepherds, low-paid farm workers, that the condition would also apply to farm managers, farm owners that perhaps farm on a site where there is no dwelling or a second dwelling is required. But what we did do was we did say to the applicant, if you provide us with a valuation, we will ask our agricultural consultant to have a look at that and give us an indication as to whether they think it's so far beyond the reach of anybody that could comply with the condition that there is no point in marketing. We couldn't agree terms. The applicant suggests that the council was insistent on their terms. The applicant was very insistent on their terms. The applicant wasn't prepared to consider the marketing of the property in isolation and considered that the whole estate had to be marketed, while the remainder of the estate is in equestrian use, not agricultural use, and the terms of the condition applies to occupation of the dwelling, doesn't tie the rest of the land to the unit. So the council's view was that first and foremost, it should be valued as its own block, but we could not reach agreement with the applicant, so we are left with the applicant's own estimation, which we don't consider is independent, and we have no marketing evidence that has tested whether or not there is any demand for this property. I'd also draw attention to members to the appeal decision that's appended to the report. That relates to a property that was also considered to be, firstly, that property, similar to this one, had been occupied by persons in breach of the condition. In that decision, members will see that the inspector agreed with the council that that breach only applies while that person is in occupation. Once that person ceases to occupy the premises, the condition bounces back and takes effect again. So it doesn't remove the condition in perpetuity if a lawful development certificate is granted. And the second issue was that even though that property subject to the appeal, even though that property was equally determined to be a high value property and a large property, the inspector still concluded that in the absence of any marketing, that the application to remove the condition was unacceptable. So we would draw some quite clear parallels between this application and the appeal that's appended to it. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for that. I am struggling with this one because I do know the area. In the past, I know that with the riding school, I don't think I need to declare an interest. My daughter, especially, was riding there, and she's 14 years old when she was about 3 years old. It's been a long time in use, in equestrian use. And I must say, just hearing that then, I find it difficult how you can separate that out when you've got the riding school right next to it, and you have to go into the main driveway and going up to it. That whole area. So I can see that it probably would be difficult to separate that out and market it as two separate bits. We've also got a concern that recently we have allowed, it hasn't been picked up too much in there, that just to the front of this site, we have recently allowed housing. And although it is in the countryside, it says it's about the high landscape value land, but we've allowed housing. And it is self-built housing, and there is a difference there because it is needed, but we are still saying that it's acceptable for people to live in that area. And I do struggle with the saying that the change of use can't be enforced. It's only the one person. If someone new comes in, it reverts back and could be enforced. Change of use, I know an instance in Iwade where a garage sold cars for years and years. Different people have come and gone and are selling cars. They got a lawful certificate saying that the cars could be sold from that site. It didn't matter who it was. Anyone else can come and buy it and sell those cars. That change of use has carried on. How we get to a point where agriculture is any different to that. But that said, I think the officers are right because the products are are strong with agricultural use, and we need to make sure that those properties are available. So it's a difficult one. For us as a committee, what concern I've got is that there's no actual policy saying that it has to be marketed for 6 months. It does say in the report here that we've got, on practice, such applications should be marketed for months.
Can we have a page?
It's paragraph 8.4, 56 on my agenda. There, so the key here is whether any need exists for the dwelling in question with the agricultural occupancy condition. So what we're saying is, and what officers are saying, is there a need for agricultural occupancy in the first place? And then it goes on, it's common practice, such application that property is marketed for an appropriate period of time, appropriate discounted price. So we've not actually got a policy that says that we have to do that. And it needs to establish whether there's an interest from the wider agricultural community in the property. So I think the officers have got it right, but it's down to us as a committee to say whether we think with the way that this property is set with agricultural use, it's not been agricultural use, and I won't say it's a failure of this council not enforcing it, because nobody has obviously complained about it for it to be looked, investigated and enforced. And if no one's complained about it for that amount of time, it's not actually an important concern. And so I think it's down to this committee now to say, do we really push that onto the agricultural occupancy, or do we go with the applicant and say that actually, realistically, this isn't going to be brought up by someone in agricultural farming, and it's right that it is, the value is too high for that and should be removed.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, you just said something that reminded me. Wasn't this council involved in some ways with their equine activities at some point in the past?
Haven't got a clue.
Anyway, what's you thinking? One of the things that Mr. Dan Page said, how does someone market a property they have when the owner has no intention of selling it? He couldn't do it because it would be in breach of his code. What we're expecting when estate agents say they couldn't do it?
Well, quite frankly, I don't think that's our problem. I don't think an applicant can use that to say that they can't test the market. If they have no intention of selling the property and they have been in breach of the condition for more than 10 years and can occupy the property as it stands, then maybe the suggestion is that they make their application when they do want to sell the property and lift the condition. But I don't think that can be used against the council.
I asked was, how do we expect, you said it's not for us to worry about. I always remember that we're told about reasonableness. Wondering how reasonable we sound to insist that somebody does something when the experts have said they couldn't do it. But I think I've got Tony Winkler's next.
Thank you. Can the officer show me a photograph of the existing agricultural building, please?
I can show you, if I zoom in on this aerial photo, in fact, if I use, that might be better.
This is as close as you can get, is it?
That's as good as it gets, yeah.
Okay, I just want to have a look at it before I make my final decision. I think I know, but I'll wait and listen to the rest of the debate first. Thank you.
Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 53. I'm a bit of a stickler, as you know, Chairman. It's customary, looking at the reason for referral, it's customary that the, in this case, Councillor Roger Clark attends or either sends in commentary as to why we're sitting here and discussing something that's up for refusal. My first point, I think, as you just mentioned, that is unreasonable.
Things have changed in the last 4 years, Councillor Booth. It's
Sorry,
quite often.
Oh, is it? Let's hope we have more wasted time then, Chairman. Page 55, it's very clear there are 6 policies detailed there. Whilst we have an appetite to approve or not approve applications, sometimes we have to make decisions that are not appetising to some people. I endorse the commentary in 8.3, where DM12 indeed sets a high bar. We have to, as a borough, protect as much of this rural landscape and dwellings that are located in that to the nth degree. And my concern is on page 57 on 8.5 with the noted 26-year breach and then the 10-year excess period. Chairman, I'm as clear as clear. The officers have made the correct decision and I shall be endorsing refusal. Thank you.
Councillor Harrison.
Chairman, I would have thought that it was, if you have sat here, I'm pretty sure I wasn't, some of you sat here and agreed an application on the basis that it was for agricultural stroke farm workers. And in my humble experience, most agricultural farm workers rent where they live. They don't buy, it's not where it works. And you can look at all, you know, in the surrounding area from where we are, they rent. But anyway, you've got an application before you, then we need this building because there is a need for agricultural workers accommodation, and actually I'd agree with it. I say could, to actually have an agricultural worker there, because quite clear it's outside any area in which planning permission would normally be granted for a new dwelling, and this permission is only granted because the dwelling is considered essential in industry or agriculture. I don't think that there is any choice in this matter for this committee. Chairman, it's quite clear. Support the officer's recommendation for refusal.
Councillor Harrison, just to remind you that, as Councillor Hunt said, we've just agreed 9 houses next to it in the last 2 years. Now, Bonnie, Councillor Bonnie.
Thank you. I think the point of trying to get, and I totally understand where the officers are coming from, trying to get some market information, find out the need, and you can't independently find that out without going to the market. So I think that is the right approach. And actually value is a price of many things, of many factors, including restrictions and agricultural tenancies, the effect of restricting value. So they might come out with a high value, but that would be if it was an open market situation, and of course not without this restriction. So I do think here officers have come to the right conclusion. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Yeah. I actually take issue with what the supporter said about marketing and it's against the code. Probably if you talk to any number of estate agents right up and down the length and breadth of the country, there have been probably hundreds, if not thousands, every year that put their house on the market to test where the value of their property sits, they get a few offers in, they evaluate those, and then they take the property off the market. So I think that one's a bit of a red herring. I actually agree with what Councillor Harrison said. Most agricultural workers don't own their properties. They rent from the farmer who they work for. So that really blows that one out of the water as well. Again, I think the officers have got this one dead right, and I shall be following the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Can the officer policy thing really, but just explain how this is 8.8. The condition does not tie occupancy of the dwelling to farm. It allows a person employed or last employed locally in agriculture or forestry to occupy the property. What is the purpose of that? What are we trying to achieve with that?
Well, there are circumstances where when an agricultural dwelling has been permitted, where as part of the terms of permitting that dwelling, the land that is attached to the dwelling that forms part of the unit is essentially tied to prevent ownership being severed. That's done via Section 106 agreement normally. But in this instance, there's no Section 106 agreement on the site that prevents severance of the dwelling from the surrounding land. So the dwelling can be occupied under the terms of the condition of any use of the surrounding land.
And just to clarify one of the other points that was made, why didn't we seek the advice of a agricultural expert as we usually do? I think we addressed that, but just to be clear.
It's basically because we had no real proper independent evidence to give to them. To ask that advice, we got the applicant's estimate of what their property is worth.
Excellent.
Can I just clarify the age of the house and when the agricultural condition was imposed on it? I'll come back on that.
Yeah, the planning permission for the house was permitted in 1991. There have been other previous versions that had been permitted as well. It is partly in the planning history at the front of the report. So you can see there that I think originally a permission was granted for a house in 1976, and a number of applications were received up until 1991, and the house was built under that permission in 1991.
Thank you for that. We've got to come back and say, let's look at this whole concept of agricultural conditions. You mentioned at the beginning that we may want some training in this area, but having been around for quite a long time, as indeed Councillor Harrison has, yet from time to time issues of this kind of condition, and this council has always fought to keep them. The house was built only for agricultural usage, then it stays that way, and the person who builds it and the subsequent owners, if there are any, recognises that the lowering of the value which that carries that house would not have been built if an agricultural condition had not been imposed. And I believe that the officers are correct, that frankly, it's tough luck. Things may have changed, but it was fully understood when it was allowed to be built, and that has to remain. So I think we should try this matter. Thank you.
Okay, if there's nobody else, vote in favour, please indicate. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation. Vote against and abstentions. Okay, we're going to have to revert back to the minutes that I've got
Chair.
taken.
Sorry, can you announce what the?
Oh yes, that was carried. There was 2 against, no abstentions, and the rest 4. I think that's 14. 15. Okay, if we can go to where are they? Agenda item 4. Okay, so we first have we've got 4 lots. Try and get through them. Right, the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of May. So I'll propose them, come seconder. Good. No seconder. Thanks, Councillor Hunt. Anybody want to talk on these minutes? Agreed? Agreed, thank you. Minutes of the meeting on the 25th of May, I'll propose. Second. Angela, Councillor Harrison. Anybody want to talk on them? Agreed? Agreed. The minutes of the reconvened planning committee on the 1st of June. They are to propose these and seconder. Seconded, Councillor Watson. Anyone want to speak? Those in favour of accepting the minutes? Agreed, thank you. And the minutes of the 5th of June 2023. I'll move the minutes of the seconder. Seconded, Councillor Winkler. Anybody wish to comment? Agreed. Agreed. Lovely, thank you. Right, the next one we're going to take is the speakers. Item 2.1, which is Cairo Lodge in Dargate. Give you the time to get there.
You can still outside it. Just not. Firstly, there's no update for this one, so the report as it is. So the proposal is for the demolition of an existing bungalow and also keeping on the same themes for the conversion of an existing store stroke garage to a holiday let. The erection of a front porch with access ramp, installation of a new metal sliding access gate. Starting off with an overview of the site. Hopefully it's signposted for us there, so Cairo Lodge. This is the building in question in terms of the conversion to a holiday let. Half of the building is already in use as a, as a holiday let. And there's a further part of the building which has been proposed to be converted. Here is the bungalow that's proposed to be demolished. Here is what was built as a replacement dwelling for the bungalow, which hasn't as yet been demolished, but I'll talk about that a bit more in a second.
Chairman, would it be possible for the officers to maybe open up their page to full screen so we can get a larger view of the photographs?
Are we technically able to do that? Bit bigger.
I think if I do it the other way, I can zoom in if that's better. I can't. Lost the ability to zoom on this one. This is again. No. Yeah, that's what I just did, and then I seem to have lost the ability to zoom in when I do that.
Would you like to come around here? Yeah, there's nice. Yeah, but actually, I think that's
Zoomed in. I've got no idea what's going to happen on the next slide. I'll just go through that again quickly. This building here, this is currently one holiday let and a garage stroke store, and the proposal is to convert the garage stroke store into a further holiday let. This is a bungalow here, which is proposed to be demolished as part of the proposals. And this is a replacement dwelling for the bungalow, which hasn't been demolished yet, but is proposed to be as part of this scheme. So, I won't come in again. Right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is essentially the plan view of what I've just spoken about. The red line indicates the application site, the holiday let stroke garage here, the bungalow to be demolished here, and what was built as a replacement dwelling for the bungalow here. The blue line is, as always, the rest of the site is in the applicant's ownership. That large enough? Yeah. Okay, this is just zoomed in essentially. With again those three buildings with the bungalow shown dashed there, which is to be demolished. Parking area for the two holiday lets, for what would be two holiday lets if it's approved, shown as here and here. And they've got an amenity area to the rear. Yeah. There's a small extension proposed to the front as well. Existing floor plan, existing holiday let. It's here on the left-hand side, and also extends into the roof space. And there's the existing garage and store. Proposed converts that garage and store into the one-bedroom holiday let. Excuse me, and the remainder is the same. The external changes are essentially changing the garage doors to glazing, which I'll show on the elevations shortly. You draw a line where the eaves of that roof is. Just about to see the cursor there, top left. The right-hand side of that building is where the ground floor of the right-hand side of that building is the proposed area. So the external changes are two garage doors to go to that glazing and a small extension to provide access into the property. Finding photographs, it's the building I was just showing the elevations and floor plan of. And the bottom right one shows on the right hand side is where the proposed holiday let will be. The parking areas are there on the bottom left and also essentially from where the photo is being taken. Photos of the site. The top left is the two dwellings which I've referred to. Left-hand side one bungalow to be demolished, and right-hand side is the replacement dwelling that's been built. So, in summary, the application is recommended for approval. As
Good. Can I ask now that Steve Waterman, the applicant,
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for listening to my comments. In October 2022, we submitted a planning application to create an additional disabled access holiday let at Cairo Lodge in place of the existing garages and to put a replacement garage where the to-be-demolished bungalow currently stands. Neighbours who commented were in support of the application, as well as Lynn Newton, who was the Swale Economics Officer who supported the original application as well. The only objection received was from the Parish Council, who deemed the three-bay replacement garage overdevelopment. As recommended by Swale Council, we were advised to amend the plans to remove the three-bay garage on the site of the soon-to-be-demolished bungalow to alleviate the concerns of the parish. However, these plans were still determined by the Parish Council as overdevelopment. To be clear, the only new element proposed on the site will be a small porch and ramp, which would help facilitate disabled access to the proposed holiday let. There have been several B&B recently converted or built in the area, but many are no longer running or as successful as Cairo Lodge. We have received Airbnb Superhost status twice and will be awarded the same in 2023. Every guest who has stayed at Cairo Lodge Farm has left a 5-star review, the highest available. All bookings are 5 stars out of 5. We have a 0% cancellation rate. We regularly hit 10 stays or 46 nights each 3 months, and we have a response rate of 100%. As detailed in the original planning application, there are no Airbnb disabled access holiday lets in the area which allow wheelchair access and have accommodation all on one level with disabled bathrooms. We have received requests for accommodation because we cannot provide the above requirements. This is not only from disabled guests, but also from elderly guests who cannot manage stairs anymore. Is that both holiday lets can be accessed internally to work as one large holiday let, allowing younger guests in the existing accommodation to assist elderly or disabled guests in the new accommodation without having to go outside and re-enter. All our guests have mentioned how they've enjoyed the pubs, restaurants and visitor attractions in the local area, which bring in much needed revenue for those establishments. We can report to the planning committee that a recommendation is to grant the planning application. We very much hope you'll agree based upon the evidence provided. Thank you. Thank you.
Seconder, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're considering this plan only because from the Parish Council. And it seems to me that the Parish Council are not, frankly, very serious about this. They have not sent anyone to argue the case. And more to the point, Parish Council's comments are that they voted unanimously, noting the plans to be no change to their comments posted on the 3rd of November. Well, that is clearly simply not correct, because as the applicant said, on the advice of officers at Swale, they took out the additional garage, so it is development as was originally being proposed. Personally, and I know this area pretty well, I don't see a problem to the first application, never mind the second. I believe we not need to discuss this in any further detail. It does not do any harm. It creates the accommodation disabled and older people. That seems to me to be a very good idea, and I hope we will approve it.
Thank you. Can I just check with the officers? The amended drawings, or are we still sticking with the original application?
No, amended drawings. So there is no there was an additional garage essentially where the bungalow to be demolished is located. That was originally proposed, and as Lenson bit up there, we considered that to be an overdevelopment of the site, causing some harm to the rural character of the area, and asked them to delete it, and they did. So yeah, it's the amended version.
Thank you. So the original parish council objections were valid to the point that they contribute to remove of the extra garage. Okay. Anyway, those in favour, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13. 14. Those against? Oh yeah, you left the room, didn't you? Okay then. Right, what's next? That is carried. 3.1. Right, this is application 505870, light industrial unit, Hillcourt Farm, Woodgate Lane. An update on, or any comments from the officers?
No update to this one, so report as is, and I'll just take you through the proposal. This is an application for the conversion and change of use of an existing former light industrial workshop into a 3-bedroom dwelling, and change of use of an adjacent detached building into a office, and to be converted into a home office to be used for the occupier of the dwelling. I'll zoom in on that. Yes, the site is effectively here. It's these two buildings which are relevant in terms of this application. And form. So it's these two buildings. The larger one is proposed to be converted to the residential unit, with the smaller one to be converted to the home office. There's a fairly long private access road which runs from Woodgate Lane, which then connects to Maidstone Road, and that's how you access the site. And drawing, but a little bit of an additional detail that essentially shows how the roof form will be when the proposal was. Well, that's slightly unclear, but that's essentially the existing floor plans, which you'd say was a former light industrial building. The elevations and the photographs will show that in a little bit more detail shortly. So you've got the larger building again and the smaller building on the right. Proposed elevations here, 3 bedrooms, lounge, entrance hall, kitchen, garage at the front, and then you've got the associated home office with office, studio, and that. For the existing elevations, it's a fairly nondescript building of repair, and you'll see in the photographs shortly. And here's the proposed elevations of the dwelling. Hipped roof, and the smaller building with a shallow pitch. Now, there's the existing site. as you can see, in poor state of repair. Larger building, that's taken inside the larger building there. There's the smaller building. And on the right is a wider view of the site. In terms of access into the site, this is Woodgate Lane. This photo on the left was taken close to the junction with Maidstone Road. The one on the right a little further along Woodgate Lane. And here's the private track which runs up to the site. Again, the one on the left is taken at close to the junction with Woodgate Lane, on the one on the right a little further on. As per the report, the recommendations for refusal, and that's primarily because we've assessed an almost identical application in the past. It was refused and it was dismissed at appeal. So the reasons for that set out in the report, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Mrs. Marion Miller?
Right. Good evening. I beg to challenge this report on sustainability and use. Way and Woodgate Lane, allowing this location to increase by nearly 50%. Field barn on our boundary on Woodgate Lane was approved for dwellings. The delegated officer reported that the location was not an issue. So if it was sustainable for them, why not? Inevitably expands, Maidstone Road remains an excellent regular bus service. The use of cars has become essential for all outlying locations like this. This site and building was abandoned by business use, including 2 auctions. Potential for business use has been well tested, and we were the only person willing and able to save this redundant brownfield site building. The site is well located for a small business, so why not our architect's business then? This report indicates permitting by all consultees with its extremely rare Borden Parish Committee support. Commercial building on previously developed brownfield site and voluntarily offer money to improve Woodgate Lane, benefit of our local community. The report concludes that no harm to neighbours' amenities or those of any occupants with little firms you do not meet your 5-year housing, so consider NPPF. We propose a low carbon passive house refurbishment, locally sourced materials and labour, full renewable energy for heating and lighting, the only viable reuse of the buildings on offer. We intend our electricity meter to go backwards. We've given prior planning consent to reduce the existing building footprint by 60% and refurbish with a new pitched roof. Our site is sandwiched between neighbours 30 metres away in a nice cosy hamlet. So what would you like us to do with the building then? Why not a mix of a family home and adjoining business use to the local community? Our voluntary offer of public right-of-way Woodgate Lane refurbishment is because KCC will not adopt or spend money on it as a private road. KCC work themselves to their specifications, 90% of a voluntary liaison. We disagree with this. Building has a negative impact, not a beautiful conversion. Finally, I ask you to look at business residential use as a logical and reasonable exception to policy that members of this committee can approve, as Borden Parish Council have done, to ensure buildings have a viable, useful life rather than go into developmental decay.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll move the officer's report. Another seconder. Thank you. Councillor Bonnet. Yeah, I've just got a question on this. Because we've always heard that there is that, conversion of all agricultural buildings. So why does that not apply in this one? Can you just have clarity on that?
Yeah, we've had an application, if you look at the planning history under 21-500-951, PNQCLA, for a plan application with change of use from an agricultural building. And that's been refused. But I believe the reason for that is because it was not fit the terms of an agricultural building as required by the GDPR to fall under the terms of that application. So, I mean, as you can see from the history, there's various attempts to convert this building to residential use, and they've all failed, and they've all failed at appeal.
I just want to say, I would declare interest. I'm on Borden Parish Council. I wasn't on the committee that approved this. On this. Councillor Winkler.
Thank you, Chair. This is a difficult one for me, this one. Previously, we basically went along with the recommendation to property. And it's basically, it's the same. And he was saying that, looking at those structures are in a very derelict state. So in this case, my view is at the moment, to turn it into a living accommodation could be an improvement. But yet again, I'll listen to the rest of the debate. Right.
Any other hands? Oh, here's Councillor Bonny.
Yeah, thank you. I wonder if the officer could expand a bit more about it previously being marketed for business use and what they know of it.
In this application that's been marketed, and presumably in the previous application that wasn't the case because the inspector also noted that that was a shortfall of the application. So no evidence would be my answer.
Because I think it's auction twice, which to my mind there's been difficulty around this site historically.
I think they were referring to when they purchased it.
Twice, that's once.
I don't.
So there must have been a previous.
Maybe they went to 2 auctions and bought it on the second one.
Which means it didn't sell on one. I think looking at the state of this building, bearing in mind we've just gone to a holiday let, which was basically our half-built stables, managed to be turned into a holiday let, and that was a new building, or relatively new building. This is dilapidated and old. In any other proposition of what could be used for, it's got a long history here. I find as well with it having a small business in a rural community would be a benefit. I have to say I find this a difficult one, and I'm probably actually erring on going against the officer's recommendation. I'll listen to the rest of the debate.
Okay, I just also, when did the other 20-odd housing unit development at the bottom of this road get fitted? It wasn't that long ago, so I'm
Sorry, Chairman, relevant, but
against it. On sustainability,
each
Councillor Clark.
application is determined on its own merits. You should know that, Mr. Chairman.
It's sustainability, Councillor Clark. I want to know if the previous decisions were before it was found sustainable to put 20-odd buildings further down the road.
I have to come back to you on the exact date, but of importance, I think, in terms of that point, is the inspector's comment about housing further down Brookgate Lane, close to Maidstone Road, where the inspector essentially said that there was for those dwellings, there was a footpath link along Maidstone Road. This site is obviously divorced from Maidstone Road, and the council and an inspector has already considered it to be unsustainable. Essentially, nothing's changed in terms of the location of this site or how you'd access more sustainable settlements. So that's the reason why we've come to the same conclusion.
Councillor Booth?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. What's useful goes with all these applications. Starting on page 37, complete planning history. The officers usefully give the planning application numbers. I'm quietly confident that all members would have looked up all of those, and in particular, the appeal decisions and the reasons why they've been refused. And I document will be 5 times as big for those refusal comments were to be relayed at this meeting, Chairman. So I'm confident with the officer's decision will be going in favour. Thank you.
Did I get a second? Yep. Okay, those in favour, please indicate. Five, 6, 7, 8, 9. Those against? 4, 5. Any abstentions? 1. So the officer's recommendation is carried. Right, the next item we will take will be 3.2. Uh, 50172/6/4, 130 Horsham Lane. Does the officer have an update or a summary?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. A very minor update. Members will see the tables update was circulated earlier this week, just setting out the background plans and documents that were submitted with the application. In terms of, I'll just do a very quick presentation. The site is located in the middle of a terrace of 6 units. The wider site is to the west of Upchurch on Horsham Lane, outside of the built confines, but within a small cluster of buildings, mainly those buildings are mainly residential development. And the application is to erect a single-storey rear extension to the property. It's here. This is existing proposed floor plan. So the property's already got a lobby, small lobby on the back of the unit, which is mirrored on the neighbouring property. And the application proposes to demolish that lobby, and erect a 4-metre deep extension across the width of the property, and would be 3.3 metres in height. And there's the lobby that's going to be demolished, and this is the extension that's going to be built in its place. Side elevation. So this elevation here is the elevation that would be evident to the property immediately south. The photos, this is the front of the terrace, and at the back, this is the current arrangement. This is the lobby that's going to be removed and the extension built in its place. This is the neighbouring property here, and that's their boundary there. So you can see the neighbouring property currently sits at the same depth at the back as the application site does. In terms of the merits of the application, members will know that we have supplementary planning guidance on the house extensions. That guidance recommends that extensions shouldn't extend more than 3 metres in depth when they are on or close to the shared boundary with neighbouring properties. As this extends 4 metres in depth, our view is that this application is unacceptable in terms of the impact that it has on this property here to the south. We're not concerned because of the fact that they have this lobby area here, so the extension extends the extent of the extension beyond the lobby isn't a concern to us, but for this property here, given the 4 metre depth of the extension, we consider that to be unacceptable. We did ask if the application would be amended to a 3 metre depth, but that was declined. But yes, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
May I ask Clive Piper, the applicant, to speak, please? Large button with the red sticker on it. Lovely.
Chairman and committee members, just listening to that report, I still don't understand why the 4 metres is an issue coming out when the extension is not visible from anybody other than people in their gardens. I've approached the people that are concerned because there was a light issue brought up, as well as the size and the height of the building. That situation and the length of the building, neighbours concerned have not raised any objections whatsoever. There's been no objections from anyone else in the area. I understand why we're even at this stage. But I've done it's 3 metres high because I've done it with parapet walls to keep in with the buildings, which were built in 1880. Obviously, they did have plastic fascias and soffits and guttering and bits and pieces like that. And sustainably, we don't want to keep using plastic. So that's why it's a little bit higher than normal. I've put in as much light as possible because obviously I have windows down the side. I don't understand really what the objection is. When you clearly pass one at number 15 Horsham Lane, they've got a 7 metre extension. And the last metre of the extension is actually wider and visible from the road than the existing bungalow that's there. So for putting a 4 metre building into an area that nobody is ever going to see, I just don't understand why you're turning it down. Yes, is it?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Palmer, you called this one in, but you wish to speak as the ward member.
Yes, I can confirm I called it in, and as the ward member, I come to speak in support of this application. I'm a bit backward as well, and I can understand the applicant's concern. Page 50 of the officer's report, there's no objections from the parish council, and those who have dealt with parish councils will know that as soon as anyone in a village or a community has a concern about something going up, the parish council is the first one to know and to have that informed. The fact that they have made no objection, I think, speaks volumes. There are no local objections from local residents, and the neighbour has not raised any concern. If the officer was concerned about the sunlight, then why wasn't a sunlight assessment requested from the applicant? I don't think the applicant should be disadvantaged this evening because the officer is clear about that the extension is modest and would not be visually harmful, and that's made clear at 7.2 in the report. Victorian terrace houses are all normally built in the same style. Front door opening from the street into the living room, then followed by the dining room, a central dining room, then the kitchen. Often the toilet was in the garden, but over time small extensions were built accommodating the toilet and bathroom. There would be no, the rear rooms, the kitchen, are not habitable rooms and would not be affected by sunlight. The loss of light and all that only affects habitable rooms. A kitchen and bathroom is not a habitable room. Not as a significant, and the word in policies are significant, overshadowing through the loss of daylight. I feel this committee should approve this application, particularly as the affected neighbour hasn't commented and the parish council hasn't commented. Failing that, it may be beneficial for you to do a site visit, because once you've seen the effect of it or what's proposed in daylight, I think you will realise that this application should be
approved without delay. Thank you.
I'll move the officer's recommendation. Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a degree of sympathy with the applicant. However, I'm sure, like my colleagues here today, a resident in your ward or perhaps comes to you and says, I'm thinking about this, and there is a potential clash with regards to dimensions. My first port of call is to seek guidance from the officers. That has been done, and over the dimension was given, and not apparently not. Page 51. Can the officer confirm, firstly, and I'll come back, that plan now, so it says it's cited properly.
Okay, can you answer that?
Yeah, that's correct. If well,
perfect. Yeah, you've answered my question.
I'm going to assume I'll let you come back, but
thank you, Chairman. In that case, then, in the mornings, those properties will be subject to sunlight in the front of the building. Late afternoon, sunlight at the back of the building. I think the risk of going down the road of shadow is a dangerous one. I don't think you would necessarily be able to demonstrate shadow effect from the way that those buildings are positioned. Again, I come back, Chairman. I think the advice is there. We may not be seeing this as a refusal if the applicant adhered to perhaps the guidance from the officer. So in that case, I'm in favour of refusal. Thank you.
Okay, just pick up on this 7.7. So I remember we had an application very similar to this from Lower Halster about 4 or 5 months ago, where this committee was concerned about sunlight. Now here it says the neighbour has not made any representations on the application, so it's difficult to verify whether there is any impact. Now at that meeting, we actually specifically said, oh, have you had a check? No, we haven't had a check, but we think it's all right. Here we're saying, no, we haven't had a check, but we think it's a problem. I always find that a bit awkward. And can we clarify, it's the extra metre. So we would not have objected to 3 metres, but 4 metres. It's the impact of that extra metre on sunlight, on lighting.
Yeah, correct. It's the extra metre. I mean, if I can point members to paragraph 7.5, that sets out our long-standing supplementary planning guidance, and that makes clear that we would normally only allow a maximum projection of 3 metres where extensions are close to a common boundary.
Now, can I ask the question was, is it the difference between 3 and 4? And you've answered that. Thank you. Councillor Winkler.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, the officer has just made my mind up where I'm going to go on this. It seems to be that the applicant has not complied with the building regulations. So I think I will be going with this recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Very brief, I'd like to propose a site visit.
Let's say why.
I don't know this area very well at all. I don't know these cottages, and I can't really tell from the pictures how the extension might possibly affect the neighbours on either side. And I think I need to take a closer personal look at it to actually make a determination on this.
Councillor Speed. on the site visit?
The points are all weighed.
Councillor Boone on the site visit?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I to go with the site visit, but the difficulty is we're not going to see anything. Unless, as has been done previously, officers can demonstrate with a suitably sized stick. But that again, it doesn't really give you any more sight of it. So I'm not in favour of a site visit. I think we should.
Councillor Washington.
Yeah. With the extensions, I need to go down 4 metres because I want to go down and it might be out. Another house in Sheerness is very similar to this. Open tight inside, it was a nightmare trying to do it. I've been thinking.
Okay, so we'll take a vote on the site visit. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, following up on Councillor Booth. Could be value in the site visit, but only if we have it in the evening. We covered this South Wall position and to have a site visit at 5 o'clock. Might get some value from it, but given that that's pretty unlikely, then I don't.
Okay, unless this committee specifically says it wants to have a site visit at a specific time, which I'm happy if you want to do that, but it needs to come from this committee if we want to vary the normal time. So are people preferable to a 5 o'clock site visit than a 10 o'clock? Can I have a quick indication on that? Favour of 5 o'clock?
Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy with that.
Okay, then we'll change it to, yes, Andy?
I don't know whether this makes a difference or not, but just to be very clear, officers aren't suggesting that the building is going to cause an overshadowing impact. We're well aware that it's to the north of that site, but there is still an issue about loss of daylight. So shadow obviously is caused by the sun, daylight comes down vertically. So there's an issue with that, and there's also an issue with the size and depth of the extension and the enclosing effect that it has. But we're not suggesting it's going to cause overshadowing through loss of sunlight, because we're well aware that it's to the north of the property in question that we're concerned about. Thank you.
Councillor Stephen.
If daylight comes down vertically, as you said, and you're going straight on top of the extension, it's not going to affect anything, is it? Going to the next either side of that extension. It's only if it's coming down at an angle. We've already established that through the sunlight going east to west there, it's not going to be a problem. So what's the point? If it's going to come down vertically and have no effect, and it's not going to affect sunnies, what is the point?
Councillor Clark, would you like to play the site visit at 5 o'clock or a site visit at 10 o'clock?
You put me between a rock and a hard place there, Mr. Chairman. I understand what the officers say, and I understand what Councillor Stevens is saying. I also take on board Councillor Booth or Councillor Henderson saying about the east-west and the right thing. I think maybe a 5 o'clock in the afternoon site visit.
Okay. Those in favour of a 5 o'clock site visit, please indicate. 3, 4, 5. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, well, the site visit at 5 o'clock then. Okay, there won't be a site visit, so on this, councillor Speed.
Chairman, I'd just like to echo the comments that Councillor Palmer made at the outset, which is there's no objection from the parish council, there's no objection from any neighbours. So what we seem to be talking about is 1 metre, which seems to me a point that the applicant made that the council approved a 4 metre extension in the same vicinity just up the road that was which is not visible. I just wondered, Chair, officers could comment on why they approved that other 4 metre extension, and I'm recommending refusal of this.
Andy?
Yeah, the application at number 15 was submitted under permitted development under what's called the prior notification procedure for larger extensions, where the council is hamstrung from making any kind of analysis about impacts on neighbours unless specifically neighbouring properties object to an application. When we're dealing with a planning application and not a prior notification application, which this is, yes, we appreciate the parish haven't objected and the neighbour hasn't objected, but we don't make planning recommendations primarily based on whether somebody objects or not. We base them on planning policies and guidance and impacts, and that's why our recommendation here is to refuse.
Comment on this.
I was just going to come in to say the starting point for decision making here is the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The impact and light not to be materially harmful, then this could weigh in favour of granting the application. Thank you.
I think looking at these photos, I think it's quite clear because of those extensions the other side and having the extension to that height and that depth coming out, it's quite clear without going on site visit or anything else that is going to have a pretty big impact on that property that's there. Whilst they're not objecting to it, when we have applications all the time, we get hundreds of people objecting and we go and approve it and on officer's recommendation, just because someone doesn't think against it or is not against it, we shouldn't be making any decision on that basis. I do just have a question on, just to clarify, that those extensions that are there on the other side, what depth that is on that one, and but I think it's not going to change my mind, because I can see that it could probably be maybe less than 4 metres. But I think it is difficult for the applicant, because if we were in a situation where that property next door had an extension, we probably wouldn't be saying there's any issue with the 4 metres. So it's a shame that we are in a position, but officers are making the right recommendation.
Very clarified by an officer in that.
Because those other extensions, if we've got a depth of those ones.
Okay, do we have the depths of the neighbouring extension?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact depth, but it's certainly well under 4 metres. I suspect it could well have been built under permitted development. And on a terrace property, you can build a rear extension off the original rear wall of a property of up to 3 metres in depth. So it's quite possible that that was built under those provisions.
You'd have been able to run a nice look if we'd have done on the site, is it? Councillor Bryan.
Oh, sorry. So under prior notification, we wouldn't have had a ground to say anything, but presumably because of the height of this, they can't go under the prior notification scheme. Is that correct? Why it's come to planning?
Primarily it's the height of the building. There is possibly a question mark over to what degree the existing flat roof 2-storey and single-storey projections, I mean, they're clearly not original. We don't know exactly when they were built. Could be a possibility that they that they're not original would have to be considered under, with an application for prior notification to see whether an extension would still comply or not. But it certainly is ruled out full stop by the height of the building because it exceeds 3 metres.
That clarification, that's useful. And I think for me, yes, as Officer Williams just said, I think the issues around light aren't a concern to me per se here. But the council have picked up about usability. I can understand why they've gone for 4 metres, because the difference between a 9-foot room and a 12-foot room is huge in terms of usability. And I think it would be mad to, I see that there is, this was under an old regime, and I think we all agree that the policies in our current plan are somewhat outdated. A nod to actually realism and usability. And actually that's quite useful, and design. And actually I quite like the design compared to what's currently there. It looks a bit, new design is actually an improvement on what's there. So I'm not sure I'm entirely persuaded on this one. Thank you.
Councillor Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Just a little bit of clarification on this maximum projection of 3 metres. Can we sort of, what criteria they based that on, and why was it set specifically at 3? That situation is not a problem, and that 3 metre extension is not suitable, whereas a 4 metre one is. I mean,
It's long-standing guidance that the council has had, I think, going back a number of years, which was adopted by the council. That's what we use as a material consideration to deal with our planning applications.
Officers have to stick to those. Members of the committee may decide to.
Is that a material planning for this? For the whole of Sitting Bourne, or is it whole of Swale, or is it a national?
But it's for the whole of Swale. It's Swale Borough Council supplementary planning guidance on house extensions.
So why was it set at that then?
I'm afraid I wasn't there in the 1990s when it was created. But I mean, I would suggest that 3 metres is typically what can be done under permitted development. Nowadays, without the need for planning permission, and I suspect that the council took the view that a 3 metre depth was a reasonable balance between allowing people to extend their property and not having significant impacts on neighbouring properties. And that, like I say, that guidance is still our guidance today, adopted guidance today, still in force. It's particularly sensitive when we deal with terrace properties because they're narrow plots. Impacts from extensions on either side are more accentuated, exacerbated, this doesn't comply with it, and there's no, in our view, no good reason to divert from that.
So we recommendation and not even question or consider the fact that this.
We can. We can. Yeah, we really need to move on.
I'm sorry to put you in that position, but I hope we can.
Okay. We've still got a lot to get through, and it's already 9 o'clock. So I'm going to move to the vote. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation for refusal? 5, 6, 7. Those against the officer's recommendation for refusal? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Recommendation has so we now need another proposal.
Can we check that, because I'm not right.
Okay, those in favour of the officer's recommendation for refusal, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. Yes, that's correct. Right. So we now need another proposal. Councillor Clark.
I propose that we recommend approval of this application and leave it to the officers to implement what conditions might be necessary.
Okay, we need to we've overturned the recommendation, so we need to indicate why. And I would suggest that one of the reasons is that we do not think that the light issues were significant enough for us to oppose the application. Is that right, Kelly? Okay, I'll move that. A seconder? Councillor Stephen, anyone want to speak to that? Okay, those in favour, please indicate. Eight. Those against? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That motion to give permission has been carried by 8 votes to 7. I would have had 2 votes had it been tied, but as it was carried by 8 votes to 7, I'm only limited to my single vote. There was 2 of you, Councillor Henderson for Labour, made the 7. There were 2 of you, and the rest made the 8. Okay, is that the main business done? Okay, the next items are the deferred items. Oh, there's another one, missed one. I know I was going to do that. 2.3. This is 501317 advertisement this is ours, isn't it? Indeed, Councillor Henderson. Okay, can the officer give us an update summary of this one, please?
No update for this one, so report as is, and as the chairman just indicated, the reason this is at committee is because the council is the applicant. We haven't reached any of the other triggers for it coming to committee. Just to confirm, this is an application for advert consent rather than planning permission. So advert consent for 3 double-sided map totems, which are non-illuminated, to be located in 3 various locations throughout Faversham town centre, which I'll show you shortly. So the yellow star to the south of that map, that is essentially outside the Railway Hotel, just opposite the train station in Faversham. The orange star is on Market Square, and the green star is on Court Street. These are essentially the same maps. I'll skip through them. Here's a indication of the totem signs. So very similar to what you've probably seen in other locations, including in the borough and elsewhere. So it shows a map, and it has various sort of points of interest. Shows you where you are, shows where they are, and shows the distance to them in walking times. There's an emblem on both sides of the totem as well. There's a slide which shows a comparison with other ones throughout the UK. So to demonstrate that they're smaller than the ones in London, Aberdeen, and York. There's colours that the totems will be comprised of. And is superimposed on the street scene is the one outside the Railway Hotel. Is the one at Marketplace on Court Street. And just to give you a little bit more context for those of you that aren't familiar with Faversham Town Centre, again, outside the Railway Hotel, the existing finger post sign will be removed and replaced with the totem. That's the case in each of the locations. That concludes it, and the recommendation is for recommendation is that advertisement consent is granted. Thank you.
I'll move the officer's recommendations. Seconded, Tony Winkler. Anybody got anything to say on this? Councillor Winkler.
Yeah, I personally take in favour of this item. Faversham Town. You know, it's a tourist.
Anybody else? So, those in favour, please indicate. I'll actually put the old finger for points. I'll put my hand up in here. Okay, well, that's been. Thank you. Back to the deferred items.
Chair.
Oh, yeah. To 500007 first, the Sheerness bus station, and I think that might be relatively quick. Oh, but sorry, first I've got to agree the minutes of the planning working group, which hardly anyone turned up to. Okay, can we, I'll move the minutes of the planning working group of the meeting held on Tuesday the 13th of June. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Winkler. Those in favour, accept, agreed? Okay, so can we take 22 500 007 Sheerness bus station, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. So this was reported to committee on the 1st of June, and the tabled update was circulated at that meeting as well. So members should have both those documents. There's no further updates for members. Very brief summary of the application. Right, so site's located within Sheerness Town, adjacent to the railway station. You've got a listed war memorial, which you can see there where my mouse is hovering on the opposite side of Bridge Road. And you also have partial boundary of the conservation area here. And there's also a conservation area boundary just the high street here as well. But the site itself is outside of any conservation area. This area here, this conservation area, which is part of the moat, is also a scheduled monument. The site has historically been in long-standing use as a bus station and bus depot, and this application seeks planning permission to change the use of the site from the depot to vehicle servicing and repairs. It includes an extension to the existing workshop, which and you can see here where the extension is proposed. That's the floor plan of the workshop. And the proposal is here, this lower building. Fencing has been installed around the site, and much of which is permitted development. However, the fencing at the front of the site, which I'll show on these photos, that fencing there sits immediately adjacent to the highway, and at the height installed requires permission and is unacceptable as erected. So as part of this application, we've negotiated with the applicant to pull that fence back by 2 metres and to incorporate landscaping at the frontage. These indicative details have been provided, but we are seeking to impose a condition that requires more landscaping to come through as details of a planning condition. Officers consider the land use to be of similar characteristics to the previous use as a bus depot, and the extension to the workshop is of limited impact, being set well back into the site. Conservation officer is satisfied following amendments to the scheme and the landscaping proposed that the proposal and the fence in particular would not harm the war memorial opposite or the settlement conservation areas. Our recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Okay, I thought that was the other one, Simon. I'll move the recommendation. Councillor Winkler seconded. Councillor Winkler.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I did attend the site meeting. In actual fact, it was worth going. We managed to get some amendments, as the officer stated. Just want one other clarification. I believe the applicant said that they were prepared to bring to environmentally friendly. Are we going to insist on that?
Can you confirm that that'll be a condition and that the agreements that were made at the site visit have been incorporated?
Yeah, there were no amendments following the site meeting. I think the discussion was the amendments that had taken place prior to the application being reported to committee and site meeting itself. So the amendments discussed were pulling the fence back by 2 metres and landscaping the front of the site, which we've already negotiated. I believe in one of the conditions, there's a requirement for the fence to be painted. Just having a look, I need my glasses.
You incorporate one? I'll take Councillor Harrison.
Before you take me, Mr. Chairman, I was under the impression that the eyes don't reach that far, that one of the other colleagues wished to speak. I can't see this far whether there's any yellow hands.
Oh no, I have to wait till them.
I know that there were some concerns about this area, Mr. Chairman, and if it was a completely new site, then maybe it would be looking at something. As you know, who'd put a steel plant right at the end of the high street? Nobody. It was needed at the time. So we are where we are. That's always been bus depot. What I don't want in terms of fencing is a prison. Okay, I want that so hidden, covered up. All sorts of shenanigans could take place when they're shut. You know, we need some sort of visibility there. And there is a lot of traffic going. Hopefully the traffic will see it. That's what we try and do with our neighbours. Some time ago, we did agree, and planning would take these things into consideration when they looked at applications, such things as employment. Take the view that where Swale Borough Council has policies that we have been through the mill and all the rest of it, they should be incorporated into planning as what we call it, or considerations and all the rest of it. So I've dragged up from the annals. We had this thing about local employment uses. I'm really, really keen on is, are we going to have any apprentices on this site? Because, you know, that's something that this council way back when has always been very, very supportive of. So I thought I ought to mention that these things are the policy of Swale Borough Council. They have never go, they are still in force. And it, of course, officers to pass the policies one to the next and not rely on members. They rely on members getting kicked out pretty soon, so nobody remembers what's been agreed. Put that in. But no, I don't have a problem. Apart from we don't want it to be a prison nobody can see into. It's always been a garage. Don't see any problem with it carrying on, except that we should be looking at our employment use policies when agreeing these sorts of things. So no problem with supporting the.
Thank you, Angela. I've been moved closer to 10 o'clock. Can you, I don't know if you've done yet, but you're looking for, and can you confirm the employment policies that have been taken into account in this application?
If we start with the fence colour, first of all, that's shown on the plans that have been submitted to be finished in forest green colour, and there's a condition that requires the development to be constructed in accordance with the materials as specified, where it actually says as specified on the application form. I think we can adapt that condition to ensure that the fence is coloured green as well. So I would ask members to consider a small amendment to that condition, which colour the fencing. In terms of employment opportunities, I mean, this is an existing site that has been in employment use as a bus station or bus depot, and it is continuing in employment use. This is rather different, I would suggest, to a scenario where we're looking at developments where we are seeking to secure some kind of local employment or apprenticeships and so on. This is a small scale site that only needs permission because, as a technicality, a bus depot is in a class of its own, known as sui generis. But essentially it has all the characteristics of a vehicle sort of servicing use and storage use. And I don't consider that we in any way could reasonably impose any conditions that related to who could be employed or the need to provide apprenticeships. Thank you.
Angela, would you like to come back?
Mr. Chairman, without extending this too much, I'm watching the time and I have restricted what I've said. Holds officers, I think, that when these things come forward, it is always worth mentioning the things which members find important and the policies have agreed over the years and have never received. It all helps. I'm not going to say that all the wheels, that's a good one, isn't it? Drift. I'm not saying we can force you to employ apprentices. What I'm saying is that, yes, we support things like this, and what we support even more are things like apprentices and things like employing people locally. That's add it in if they feel it's appropriate.
Councillor Bonny.
Thank you. Yeah, this site is really important in terms of its visibility. So I totally agree with the amendments to landscaping. What Councillor Harrison said about it not being a prison. Fine if it's green, that's fine. I'm not sure it makes it environmentally friendly, but it makes it green. But is it that metal fencing that the style that we currently have, because that's really prison-like. Is there something that has the same effect without looking so imposing?
This was debated at the site visit, and they said that was the industry standard.
But there's industry standard, but we've just as a council managed to, with an awful lot of effort, acquire 20 million quid to do up those bits of sheer nets, and they are literally spitting distance from this. So about it having an imposing effect on a pedestrian walking past, got the train station not very far away, you've got a pedestrian crossing and a college. It's about the environment that we are creating and the frontage of this property. So I think the landscaping is really important. What we don't want was immature plants that are going to take, 2 decades to grow. We don't want whips, that have cost 50p and take another 50 years to grow into anything substantial. But equally, having that metal fencing, I think, looking what's currently there and knowing that site, I think that's really imposing from a street scene perspective.
Can we have clarity on the nature of the landscaping, and would we be able to insist on robust landscaping? And could we, what was proposed was that maintain it. But yeah, what can we do on that one?
Well, of course, what you're seeing on the photos is as built, the fence will be moved back 2 metres from that position and landscape. So that will instantly change the visual impact. It will certainly not be as prominent as it is showing in these photos. The landscaping is essentially required by condition. So we have control over the landscaping that comes forwards. If members are of the view that, for example, tree planting in that strip needs to be of something more substantial than whips, we can consider, you can consider whether that condition gets slightly adapted so that we include a requirement that larger standard trees are provided as part of the scheme.
What about the hedge?
Well, quite. I mean, a nice pyracantha hedge is as good as that metal posting, because you won't want to climb that or try and get through it. Believe me, I've been gardening with it. That's as good as any, and it has quite a nice appearance. It's got flowers and it's got berries at the back. I think there's ways with the landscaping. The last thing I want to see is a long patch of grass and a couple of twiggy trees. You get my drift here, yeah. Native trees would be nice. Obviously, it's a coastal town. They've got to survive. And I know there's more risk with a bigger tree, but I want to make it so, I'm really well and truly retired before we see the evidence of that tree.
I think a hedge would be.
Yes.
Trees have always got gaps between them anyway.
Yeah.
Can we, the Calacantha hedge, was it?
Pyracantha.
Yeah, that.
Wicked stuff.
I'd suggest we leave our options open as to quite exactly what make up the hedge is, but certainly the landscaping scheme can include the hedge. And on the proposal that was submitted by the applicant, you can actually see that they were proposing a hedge. I mean, our view is that this needs to be extended, of course, across the whole frontage. That wasn't access, has now been fenced off, and will continue to be fenced off when the fence is pushed back. But yeah, we can develop the landscaping scheme by condition to include hedging as well as.
Okay, if we're minded to delegate that with the help of our landscapes officer, maybe.
Yeah, we normally, in most instances where landscaping is fairly prominent, we would normally ask our tree officer to accommodate any proposals that came forward.
Yeah, fine.
Good board members.
No plants with the following.
Include the ward member in that. Board members, I think. Yeah. Okay, I've still got 3 speakers on this. We have only got half an hour till we have to suspend standing orders. Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this is one of those instances where we should actually applaud the application. We're seeing rejuvenated area, we're seeing redevelopment, and we're seeing potential employment, new employment. I'm particularly saddened by Sheerness Town Council's comments. The application is detrimental to the character of the area. I didn't go to the site meeting, as you know, but I'm very familiar with the site. This actually will suitably enhance and embrace that area, in my opinion. And factually, the council's levelling up bid has not been settled yet. So where they state it is detrimental to that is not correct. As I say, I'm applaud. I applaud the applicant on this great contribution to the area. It will smarten it up. It'll give people, I would suggest in Sheerness, something to actually look forward to.
Clark. Yeah, Chairman, just a couple of quick questions. I know it is a very large site, but do we know whether it's going to be used for purely commercial vehicle usage? And my second point on that would be if it is going to be used for large commercial vehicles, with the extension of the workshop and the moving back of the fence 2 metres, will there be enough turning circle in there for those vehicles that, so that they're not backing in or out onto the road?
Sandy, have the applicants overlooked that?
I believe the intention is that it's primarily to service larger vehicles, but there's no restriction that is being proposed or recommended relating to the servicing of vehicles. You know, of course, it's a site that was used as a bus depot. It had large vehicles going in and out of it. It will continue potentially to have large vehicles going in and out of it. There's no highway safety issues that have been raised, and the site is large. I'd be very surprised if a large vehicle could not turn around in the site. Thank you.
Councillor Winkler.
I'll just come back quickly as I said. As I said, the applicant was prepared to listen. We already mentioned tonight. I do take the concerns of Andrew Harris, by Councillor Harrison, but it's basically if we further this down, it was a bus depot. I feel we would lose this. So I will be going to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very familiar with the site that you're involved in, being a Queenboy and I actually know 3 people that have actually just got job starts. 2 on the works and Virgin work, and 1's been employed as a driver. So there's 3 already on the block that I know of. Now, there was no fencing on the front as a bus depot. It was a bus, so whatever fence there is temporary at the moment. Down the side, let's drive down towards the places refuse. That's all Palace Straight, and that obviously they're going to print that free. But to make that Palace Straight, now do several options that are much better looking rather than the spike thing that is for our streets. Grundles, the main and Essex. There's fencing that would suit the line off the floor. We don't have the spikes, it's rounding, it's finished and always. So there is options available in the same quality that's acceptably better suited. So, and I'm obviously very certain that you're going to sort out the bed with the back in front. So
Okay, I don't see anybody else, so I'll move the officer's recommendation if I haven't already. It's a bit ages ago. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Left now, 14, I think. Okay, it is now 25 to 10. We have another item, but on the basis of that last one, will take us past 10 o'clock. So I'm now going to seek to extend standing orders. Those in favour of it, suspending standing orders, please indicate. 6, 7, 8. Those against? 4, 3, 5. Abstentions. 1, 2. We fight on. Right, deferred item 1. In fact, I pulled that last one in because I thought it'd be quick. Right, deferred item 1 is land at School Lane, 505618.
Ollie?
So this application is a resubmission of a previously refused application and is for 25 dwellings and the provision of a car park for the school. Just to outline the differences between the two, the applicants believe that the council's decision to postpone the Regulation 19 consultation on the local plan further impacts on the 5-year land supply, worsening the situation, and therefore are of the view that that fundamentally changes the approach that should be taken in considering the application. Just to reiterate, that's the applicant's view, so this is why they've resubmitted, and they've also provided photovoltaic cells on all of the dwellings to address members' concerns previously. On the 9th of March, the report was submitted and a presentation was given, but you will know that the application was deferred for a site visit. That site visit was held also last Tuesday on the 13th. So this red outline of the site. So just to orientate you, we have School Lane here, Boxted Lane here. This road here is a rural lane and it's got any number of different names I've discovered on site. So it's sometimes referred to Bricklands, Breach Lane, Mill Hill, Unnamed Road, various other names. The church's up this way and this is the school here. The site is outside of the village boundary. It's an aerial view of the village boundary there, so you can see quite a heavily vegetated, strong boundary line there with the school on the other side. This is the car park that's been there temporarily and is well used for school pickup and drop off. And the site comes around roughly around here. And this is the layout of the site. So it shows the car park in a linear formation here, and then the dwellings on this side. This is the rural lane here, and you can see quite again a heavy landscape boundary around the edges to the fields, open countryside. The access comes in just from School Lane and into this area here. You've got some SUDS features there. Just to note that the pedestrian route through that has been created directly from the existing car park into the school, it will be re-provided as part of this application proposal. And this slide just gives you an idea of the levels of the site and how the proposal would look. The levels are pretty similar to the existing levels, and in terms of the dwelling, the architecture of the design of the dwellings, it's similar to the locality, but the locality is quite mixed. Gives you an idea of how the development might look. So this visual, and then the next one, so you can see the text there. And the materials will be carefully chosen to integrate the development with the surroundings. This, I don't know that you can see that. I'll try. Might be able to see that. This is a wireline image, and basically that's just to show you the red outline is the dwellings behind, and then you've got the vegetation. I think that's year one that's showing you there. And then following the site visit, myself and my colleague who will be dealing with the back to the normal size. We walked the footpath. I'm not letting me go back to it. some reason I haven't got the button to actually make it full screen, so apologies for that. But we walked the footpath because that was potentially the main area of concern in terms of the previous application. So it's probably again difficult to see on these slides, but you can just about see a dwelling here, and then here and here. So at these points along the footpath, you would see the development. But what you can also see is the strength of the landscape boundary that currently exists to the edge of the village, and a re-provision of a substantial buffer to the development will provide a similar view to what you see there once the landscape reaches maturity, which is always taken at around year 15. But as you move down towards the railway station, the site, because of the contours of the land, will sort of remain fairly hidden. So that's my last slide, but just wanted to draw on the updates and give a bit of a timeline. So the March committee report and the associated tabled update from that committee sets out the assessment of the application and the officer recommendation for approval. That was on the 9th of March. The timing between that referral and producing the agenda for tonight's committee, further information was submitted from the applicant in the form of a biodiversity net gain assessment and calculation and a clarification letter regarding air quality. An update report was circulated to members last week on the 15th, advising of that additional information and stating that no objection was raised by the relevant consultees, subject to the conditions of Section 106 agreement they'd already requested. So the officer recommendation at that point remained for approval, and an updated list of conditions was also included in that update. So following the site visit, the applicant directly then emailed some of the members of the planning committee with a briefing note and further information, and a tabled update was provided yesterday that summarises this information and includes the attachments that was also included in the email sent to those members. That update also provides the officer's response. And I'm aware from the site visit and from the site visit and through councillors and from the members of the public that attended the site visit of the very serious concerns that they have related to highways and air qualities. However, March committee report, the tabled update given at that committee, includes assessment of those impacts, and this is further addressed in updates that you've received on the 15th and yesterday. In considering the application, members need to be mindful that the previous application, which is currently going to is going through the appeal process, the hearings in a couple of weeks' time, did not include reasons to refusal on highways grounds or air quality grounds. Two reasons related, and this is summarised, it's not the full wording. Firstly, the development would represent unjustified and unnecessary development in the countryside, resulting in an urbanising impact which is harmful to the character and appearance of the countryside. And secondly, because the Section 106 hadn't been completed at that time, the second reason was included that the development failed to mitigate the impact on local services and infrastructure. Since then, the 106 agreement has been drafted and has been issued for signing as part of the appeal process. So the primary reason for refusal being considered at appeal now just relates to that first reason, the impact on the countryside. So it's for members to consider whether this current application now addresses that reason for refusal or not. Thank you, Chair.
Look at what's in front of us, not other applications. So if members want to talk about other issues, if other issues are material to their determination, then that is down to them. That's for application. Can I ask the ward member, Richard Palmer?
Thank you, Chair. Just for a bit of clarification, that road's never been called Breach Lane until it appears in an officer's report. The application came to committee quite correctly on the 9th of March and was deferred for a site visit. Since then, there has been much information submitted, some by objectors and some by the applicant. Some of this is available on the portal, but most of the applicants has available for public inspection. Much of the information from the developer could be challenged by objectors, and I believe this could lead to a decision not being made on all relevant planning grounds. Two such areas would be air quality and highway, particularly relating to Church Lane at Newington. The late submission of documents which can be countered by objectors is not how planning decisions should be made. However, don't take my word of it for it. The case law is clear on this in the High Court case number stroke 3397 stroke 2022 between the plea and the claimant and the Thurnham Borough Council. At 3.1 of the judge's summary, it states, by ground 4, it is contended that Thurnham failed to make documents available in breach of section B and 100D of the Local Government Act 1972. By ground 5, it is contended that Thurnham unreasonably failed to exercise its powers to defer the meeting on the 24th of June 2020. 4.1, and I put this judgment for you to see as well, because the judge at Foot said, however, I am completely satisfied that the chair's contribution and members' supplying acceptance of what was happening plainly wrong. Members and the borough solicitor for the position of objectors, who were obviously prejudiced by the late filing of important documents. They failed to grapple with the deferred application and took a high-handed approach. As far as members were concerned, all that mattered was that a copious of evidence appeared to support the step taken, and with a clear majority of the decision makers were going to accept. The possibility of being effectively countered or rebutted was neither here nor there. As far as the chair was concerned, no further delay could be countered, notwithstanding that this was scarcely the fault of the objectors. This elementary solecism, actually ignoring what practice was, I regret to say, contributed by the advice given by the borough solicitors. At 4.2, the judge actually said, I must say that the planning committee in this case was guilty of erroneous unfairness. I would suggest that my judgment be emailed to all concerned so that lessons can be learned. This is no different. Late submission of applications is unacceptable. Thank you.
Councillor Palmer. I have to admit, I am a little irked at this constant late submission of documents from developers, and we're not allowed to hear from parish council tonight. So I am alert to how this may look. Kerry.
Application. In terms of the documents that have been provided by Thurnham Homes, the applicant, these have been points of clarification following on from the site visit. In terms of the inclusion of these documents as part of the consideration of this application, advice has been taken from the council solicitors following discussions today, and they are satisfied the due process has been taken correctly and that the correct information is available on the website and the correct background documents have been provided to members of this committee to make a decision this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I noticed on the tabled updates and all the other documents, can you tell me where the Railton report that's referred to several times is and the updated documents that refer to it necessarily? The Railton report.
That's on the website.
Yes, is it one of the, so it's not one of the documents that's put before
No.
the committee?
No.
Okay.
So the only tabled update circulated yesterday, it does include the extracts of the Railton document that the applicant has provided responses to.
Now, one of the ongoing concerns about this committee was that we have a large number of people on here who were not at the original site, not at the original hearing when it originally came to the committee, that were not familiar with the arguments. So we were told that we couldn't have the applicants of the parish council speaking again. I would have expected that some of the CUPS documents would be put before members so that they could read them, or at least it be pinpointed, as there are several hundred documents on the web. And I think a previous legal case indicated that it's not reasonable that a committee is expected to read hundreds of documents online. But I'm a little concerned at the position we may be putting ourselves as a council, but the advisory that we carry on. So I'll move the officer's recommendation. Councillor Hunt seconding. Does anybody wish to speak? Councillor Palmer.
Not included in the pool sites in 2020, not able to sustain any further development. First sentence of section 2 of the NPPF says the purpose of development. Item 8 of the same section considered for sustainable development. Aim, an economic objective to help build strong, responsible.
Councillor Palmer, we've got some conversation going on. Is there a problem?
Build a strong, responsive and competitive. Inflation rate is 8.7%, and according to the government, this is mostly due to rising food prices. This development will be built on Grade 1, most versatile agricultural land. Because we cannot grow as much due to our agricultural land being given over to housing developments. Objective to support a strong, vibrant and healthy communities by providing a sufficient range of homes to meet the needs of present and future generations. It's all well and good providing homes, but where are the schools, the GPs, the hospitals and the jobs to sustain the present and future generations? An environmental objective to protect and enhance our natural, built and historic environment, making effective use of land, improving biodiversity using natural resources, minimizing waste and pollution. The building of this development will destroy Grade 1 agricultural land, create more waste from the households that will live there, destroy natural habitat and result in poorer air quality. The village school is already full to capacity, so I predict there will be more cars on the roads taking children to schools outside the village. Highways seem to have a one-statement-fits-all policy, no objections, no concerns. As Councillor Booth so eloquently put it at a recent planning meeting regarding East Church, KCC highways don't always get it right, and this is one of those occasions. Newington Parish Council commissioned and paid for an independent highways report from Bruce Bamber at Railton, TPC, which completely contradicts the KCC report. Says that the highway for this development is dangerous. Newington Parish Council also commissioned Professor Stephen Peckham of the University of Kent to do a report on air quality. The results of that are that the new development would only increase what is already a high level of pollution. Newington School has been deemed by KCC not being suitable for expansion due to where it is sited because of highway concerns. This proposed development site is adjacent to the school and much larger than any classroom that could be built onto the school. So what has changed? I suggest that Swell Council commission their own independent highways report. And lastly, my unanswered question at the site visit was the landowner says he will not be selling any more land for building on, but there's no guarantee that 2 years down the line he won't.
Councillor Winkler.
Thanks for your chairman. I did attend the site meeting, as you know. Is the highway issue. I went up to Newington this afternoon actually, and I used to work in the rail industry. So I'm pretty okay with lorries, rail bridges and disrupting rail services. No economy as a bridge bash within the rail industry. I went and looked at the bridge. It's 11.6 height and 3.5 metres. That is a low bridge. And my observations are, if we was to pass this, the only route to this site is down Church Lane. It's a narrow road. Residents parking along there. And also at the top, when it joined the A2, it's a very narrow junction. And if we've got construction vehicles, trying to negotiate that junction coming particularly out, there's a building, I would say it's quite dangerous, danger of being. I would also just add that of the previous speaker, something I did ask at the site meeting about it's grade 1 agricultural land. So I have grave concerns, as I say, but particularly on the highways issues. There's no other suitable route, no route at all. But, you know, if they can't get down Church Lane and avoid this low bridge, there's no other route to go. Thank you.
Councillor Hunt.
This application, I know for new members hadn't come across it before, but discussing applications on this site about the fourth or fifth time now I've gone through it. And I'm not going to go over what I've said before. I agreed with officers in the past on this one. And I think it is going to appeal with the other application. I mean, we've heard there about traffic concerns and air quality, but I think we do need to consider that we haven't raised those issues in the past as a reason for refusal. We know that there is members that are sort of concerns around that, but is it a reason for refusal? I don't think it is. And we heard that the reason why we will now be defending that appeal is the impact that it has on the area. And as we've heard, and we've still got photos in front of us, that this has been looked at carefully, and officers are of the view that this isn't going to have an impact on that area. Personally, I think we haven't got a chance of winning the appeal. I think it's going to go through anyway. And I think officers are making the right recommendation again. I hope that the committee do listen to officers. I think although it's only 2 weeks away, we could hear, if this is approved tonight, not have to go through the whole appeal. Hopefully a developer would on that, and we're going to have costs of going through all that in a couple of weeks. There is probably a concern that this is outside the built-up area boundary, but as new members will probably find out as well, especially that we're going to have a lot of these applications coming up. We haven't got the 5-year supply, so we need to be building some housing. We're going to have to be putting in sites that are outside the local plan, and on the edge of existing developments is where the best places they're going to be for them, because they are in sustainable locations. So I see no reason, once again, to go against the officers.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Again, respectfully, I'm only here since May. So the history of this I've had to read, not listen to. Just so I can understand things a little better, I've got 2 questions. But before I get to that, there's been a lot of discussion about highways that I've heard, and I've read a lot of detail about the highways. And I've read the commentary from KCC Highways with regards to the education strategy. And I think that's quite weighty. I was mentioned earlier this evening regards to my earlier comments and challenging Kent Highways. I would challenge them if they were here. Right, my questions, clarifications really. The opening line on page 1 says erection 25 residential dwellings with enhanced renewable energy features. I don't know what they are, I can't find them, but perhaps the officer can just update us on that one. And my second point is particularly sensitive as it's illegal in regards to the contamination that is detailed, or potential contamination.
Do you have a reference to that, Councillor?
Yeah, that's on page 5. Item 6, 7 goes over to 8, 9, 10. So there's a little bit on there on contamination. My question is, hopefully we can get an answer. What is the deal with if contamination is found? Now, my question, as you'll be aware of, Mr. Chairman, is far-reaching. Whoever the landowner is, legally, find something to say, if we find something on there and we've got to stop work, somebody else is responsible for containing it and disposing of it. And I would suggest that has huge fine. So that's an interesting one. I don't know if that came up previously in conversation. As I say, I wasn't here, but I'm very well versed in what that can mean to one's back pocket.
Andy? Sorry, Carly?
I'll answer that, Andy, it's fine. The enhanced measures were the photovoltaic cells being added to each property in addition to what they'd previously included as part of their package of measures to deal with sustainable construction and address the council's policy on that. In terms of the suite that you refer to in terms of contamination, because it's agricultural land, the original report on the 9th said that the environmental health officers had looked at it and didn't consider there the potential for anything obvious in terms of contamination other than from any agricultural use or the proximity to the cemetery. So, but just as a precautionary measure that the suite of conditions are included, which sets out what they need to do. If they need to do an investigation, if they find anything, then they need to provide the remediation strategy to deal with that. And then, but if there isn't any, there doesn't need to be any remediation strategy, but condition 10 does deal with if they're carrying on and then they find contamination at that point, then they need to then go back and comply with those suite of conditions. But that would be developer and that would be Fernham Homes that would have to bear the cost of that.
So, thank you for that. I'm not impressed by the enhanced renewable energy features, to be fair. I like to hear enhanced, not just there. I'm still stumped on so who owns the land? Can you tell us who owns the land? That beyond our remit.
It is beyond your remit. I don't know whether Fernham have bought the land yet or not, but okay. I don't think they have, but that's not part of
so information. I understand I'm respectful. My question can't be answered in terms of who would pay the bill.
One thing that I really wanted to clarify, as I believe mentioned Kent Highways, and it is when we went to the site visit, the assumption from Kent Highways that all the traffic will turn right and go up Church Lane. And when we were sitting there, we watched loads of traffic not going up Church Lane, going in the other direction. Some even going up the road that we were told people wouldn't use. That is I find it really hard to understand how KCC's assumption is they'll all turn right and go up Church Road, which is a bit of a nightmare road. And then especially if they're coming right onto the A2 on a hill through the 20-mile-an-hour zone. It just seems absolutely illogical to assume nobody will turn left and go the short distance. And there's, that's not been taken into account by KCC. I just find that utterly, it just means that we don't have decent highway advice. It just defies total logic. Monique, Councillor Bonny.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I agree with previous councillor about the solar panels. It doesn't really swing it. I was sat on the previous committee, so I saw a great deal of detail come forward there. I think what is more important is around landscape, and I hear what the officer says, However, there's under 9.31, it says there's two elements: minimisation and mitigation of adverse impacts, and when significant impacts remain, social and economic benefits of the proposal significantly and demonstrably outweigh the harm to the landscape character and the value in the area. So my question is, to my mind, this does create significant harm to the character. Do the benefits of this development significantly outweigh that harm? And the answer is no. Where else in the borough? Because when we talk about harm to the landscape, I think in a recent appeal, there was a whole commentary at appeal that was really scrutinised, was where else could you develop that would have less of an impact? So if you could point me in the direction of that analysis, because that's really important to me.
You have that analysis?
No, I don't have analysis of where else they've looked, but I don't want to make it sound like it's just countryside, because countryside is valuable, but this site is not subject to any special local national designation. So in terms of when you haven't got a 5-year land supply and you need sites to deliver your housing target, you know, in terms of the hierarchy of land, like landscape designations within the borough, this is of the lowest scale. So when you're encroaching into the countryside, it's less of an impact in terms of the landscape designation hierarchy. And given the proposals that they're including with quite a substantial buffer, you know, officers are weighing in favour of that benefit.
Did you want to come back, Councilman?
Yeah, I think I do. So I see we're looking at the footpath there, but looking down the rural lane, the one that has no name or a contested name, and I'm concerned because we've got a policy about rural lanes, and it's about the function of how rural lanes sits with the countryside. By definition, building on this will have a significant impact. I think highways can advise, and that is the role on traffic, but we have to be concerned with, can traffic safely get into and out of this site? That is our role here tonight. And I think what we've clearly seen, all those members that went on the site visit, is despite what highways advised, traffic was doing the counter. And so the question is, can it safely, in our view, leave the site? It has to go down these rural lanes, which to my mind are protected and part of the landscape and the features of those lanes. And what we know, and I know from living in a rural area, done to those landscapes by cars out of frustration, the harm that's done, but also the creeping harm to the countryside, where you put 75 people in these houses and everyone walks their dog and leaves baubles hanging off the nice landscape trees. And actually what you have is an erosion on the countryside, and that snowballs out. So to my mind, is the tilted balance so significant that the impact on the rural landscape here is in my mind completely fettered? So I'll listen to the rest of the debate. But I think as a committee, we've made a decision before, and significant changes. They've put solar panels on the roof, and I don't think that would change much.
On the points that Carly was making in her presentation, the planning history of this site is a material consideration, and it needs to be bared in mind that the landscape harm was the only reason for refusal on this application. The application remains the same in terms of the number of dwellings, so in theory the highways movements remain the same. Members need to be satisfied that any decision that they take is reasonable and rational. And I would advise against including any additional reasons for refusal with regards to the highways. Thank you, Chair.
We are the members and we are looking at what is in front of us, and I think that is important. May not have occurred with the new committee members who may not have been impressed by issues about air quality last time and are this time. There may be others who think that landscape is important this time, do not consider landscape important this time. We're always told we can't take other planning applications into account, and then we're told we should be doing so. I'm a bit alarmed at the contradictory evidence we're getting lately. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Quick question first. Do we know the width of Church Lane, curb to curb? Or grass verge to grass verge, whatever it is?
No, I don't off the top of my head.
Right. Well, I've just looked at, I mean, I've been in the haulage industry for over 35 years. I know the turning circles, the requirements of heavy goods vehicles, both articulated and non-articulated. The average width of a heavy goods vehicle is 3.1 metres. Now, I would suggest that, having just looked at Google Maps, with the cars parked all over the place down there, whenever the Google Maps people went down there, you'd find it very difficult to get any construction traffic down there of any sort, unless they were small 7.5 ton vehicles. And no one in the construction industry is going to use that size of vehicle to take in bulk materials. So KCC highways, no objections, is an absurdity. As Councillor Winkler said, you've got an 11-foot bridge, 11'6" bridge down there, 3.5 metres. The average height of an articulated vehicle, which would be taking goods down there, is 4 metres. So you're either going to have vehicles going down there, not realising, getting stuck and having to reverse out onto the A2, or you're going to have multiple bridge strikes every day, which is going to, excuse my language, myth. I changed the language I was going to use then, but it's going to myth Network Rail no end if they've got to go out there and inspect bridges 10 times a day. So I would suggest that KCC highways need to get their finger out their backside and start giving us some proper information.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I disagree with that comment about KCC. And what I would say is that the route is yet to be conditioned, but I would hate to think of HGVs using alternative routes. I think Church Lane would have to be by default the only option that could be going. You wouldn't be wanting them going through bobbing down Stickfast. I think you'd want them going along the unnamed road. It's in a place where actually I think Church Lane is probably the most accessible route.
My colleagues here have just measured the road. It's approximately 5 metres in width, and it may or may not help. I'm not sure it will, but condition 3, where it talks about the construction vehicles, they are required to submit details of the routing of the construction and delivery vehicles to and from the site. And it is in their interest, obviously, to make sure that those vehicles are reaching the site in a safe manner. But whether that addresses your concerns or not, I'll leave that up to you.
Councillor Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to come back to this Railton report that was never submitted or never found or never read by anybody else. And I'm really concerned that a summary of 11 reasons why the highway conditions aren't suitable. Now, I read this at the original meeting up there and then, but it's been highlighted to me. And as you say, it's only to be found on the website, not in any documentation that's been presented to us. And even the scant replies that come back from the applicant consideration has been taken into account about the reasons why that that lane is not suitable for traffic, and the side of the road, even for cars passing, is going to be a problem, let alone, as Councillor Clark said, the articulated vehicles that are going to use it for work considered. But my main concern is, why wasn't this report adopted by the parish council? And are we supposed to be listening to the people that really know what's going on around there? And sorry, that this report is far more detailed than the KCC is saying there's no problem whatsoever. I would like to see a further report, either from this council or from KCC, dealing with all the reasons that have been highlighted in the Railton report, to be questioned and replied to before I make any decision. Thank you.
Online for anybody to look at, and KCC Highways have considered it, as have the applicants, and it doesn't change the recommendation from KCC Highways in terms of the impact of the development on the local network. And in terms of, can I just address in terms of turning left, they've not said that nobody would turn left, they're just saying the majority would turn right.
And there's no mitigation for turning left, is there? Actually, where is the can you remind us where the mitigation money is going for? There's what 15,000 or something?
Chair, can I come back on that? It's been presented to us and sent to us and given to us tonight, but the Railton report was left out, and I think it should have been known by all members before making a decision, and that has not happened. Again, we're getting documentation that has not been brought to our attention early enough or at all.
Councillor Golding.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would concur with Councillor Winkless. I also visited site. My observations that Church Lane was at breaking point. I think even when we left site, traffic was an issue, and the lane with the unknown name was not fit for purpose. There were my observations, and I think traffic, as pointed out by various residents, were issues with people not adhering to the parking that's available already. There's no guarantee that they're going to continue to park in allocated parking spaces. Thank you.
Councillor Winkless.
Yeah, I know. I think Councillor Ballis has been trying to draw your attention to speak.
I do apologise. Councillor Ballis.
Meeting on the 13th of June, and I have a history with Newington actually, because I used to live on the corner of Church Lane. My parents used to own that property, 53 to 57 High Street, and that Newington is a village that can't take any more expansion. Church Lane it's a lane. It's not a road, it's a lane, and it can't take any more traffic, let alone 60 odd car parking spaces. If it's going to be 60, because it's going to be more, isn't it? In reality, houses with visitors and that, it just can't take it anymore. So I'm concerned about the highway safety, and the highways have got it wrong.
Councillor Bonny.
Thank you. I found a bit I was grappling for earlier, which I think this is the advice to the JTB incumbent as well, so forgive me, but it is the same. It's about KCC, is to, within the context of application for development, give priority first to pedestrian and cycle movements. Well, none of us have discussed that, and I can't see how from this site we're going to have that safe movement, both within the scheme and with neighbouring areas. So that's just what I've said. And second, as far as possible, to facilitating access to high quality public transport with layouts that maximise the catchment area for bus and other public transport. So you have to ask yourself, would you walk out of this site and go and get a bus? Laughing, and I think that tells me everything I need to know. And it says, address the needs of people with disabilities and reduced mobility in relation to all modes of transport. I'll address that in with this site and getting people to and from it. To create places that are safe and secure and attractive to cyclists, pedestrians and all vehicles, and avoid unnecessary street clutter. There isn't any space for street clutter, and respond to local character and design standards. So, and it talks about efficient delivery of goods and access by service and emergency vehicles. And I think we've already discussed how narrow those lanes are. So I think on almost every single point there, on that JTB advice, it fails. I can't see a way around this. So it is about landscapes, but it is about ingress to this. And if we discussed it and considered it tonight, but I don't see how as a pedestrian, if you're a mum with a pushchair and bearing in mind the size of the houses these are, you're going to go out and walk along those lanes, right? I would. I know it might be bad enough, but we're considering new development and it's got to be sustainable, and sticking solar roof panel on the top does not mean it's sustainable. Sustainable means you can walk and get a bus and you can feel safe. Thank you.
5 6s, please.
Asked about where the contribution for highways would be spent. That would be Key Street roundabout. It's £34,056. And just to add, in terms of access, there are proposals to widen the road outside of the school and provide a footpath, also to extend the speed limit along that stretch, and to include waiting restrictions as well. So accessibility improvements are being proposed as part of the application.
Councillor Park.
I've just been looking again, referring to Google Maps, and there's on one of the pictures from Google Maps, there's a large transit van trying to turn right into Church Lane. It can't turn right into Church Lane because there's a car coming out, blocking both ways of the street. So if you've got a transit van that can't turn right, what hope in hell have you got of getting large construction vehicles to turn right? And it depends which way your sat-nav sends you. It might bring you off at Gillingham turning and through Raynham and down that way, in which case you're going to have lorries of all different sizes trying to turn left, which they're not going to be able to without taking out most of the houses on the corners of Church Lane. So again, I would suggest that we could defend against this development on highways grounds, and if KCC Highways aren't prepared to support us on this, then we should get our own independent study done.
On that. I think I just need to take a moment to remind members that as we know, KCC Highways have not objected to the application, and they are the statutory consultancy, and significant weight needs to be given to their comments in making this decision. And national decisions, there is landscape, and if you don't feel that what's being provided addresses that reason. However, I would highly recommend not including any additional reasons. Thank you.
Okay then. Councillor Stephen.
Yeah, we've just been hit with the parking restrictions, and what will be the cumulative effect of this to can have only got on-street parking in that lane?
The parking restrictions is intended to deal with the cars that are idling and just sitting, waiting outside the school. So the car park's being provided to next to the school to allow for that. As I believe residents have their own parking arrangements along that area of that particular locality.
In response to what Terry said about getting, you know, we have had statutory response, KCC. We all know what we think of that. There has been an independent response put forward. Wanted to put that in, but if you wanted to object on the ground for highways, you would have to, the council would have to employ Railton, or try and employ Railton to speak at the appeal. A cost, but if there's nobody else, those in favour of the officer's recommendation to approve, please indicate. 1. Those against, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I abstain. 2 abstentions. Okay, in that case we need a further not recommendation, a further proposal. Does anybody have one? Councillor Winkler.
Well, I'm going to put forward, when I basically started this debate, and others have followed on since with my initial concerns. And it doesn't change. It's the highways issue in that village.
Councillor Bonny.
Can I suggest we use exactly what we used before, because there doesn't seem to be a significant change. I think we use a carbon copy of what the previous refusal wording was. And on landscape grounds, I think we've had significant.
On landscape, rural lane of our policies, it isn't specifically a highways policy, but comes under another issue, another area of our policies. So if you wanted to include that under landscaping,
yeah.
And the impact on rural lanes.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? There's a proposal that we oppose this on landscape grounds in the same way as the last application was opposed, but also with reference to impact on rural roads, rural lanes, contrary to policy 31.
I'll second.
No, I'm only asking, I'm not proposing. I think that Councillor Speed is going to give me a rattle off a whole load of DM policies, like he did last time. The previous reason for refusal was the proposed development represent unjustified and unnecessary residential development within the countryside, resulting in an urbanising impact outside of a defined built-up boundary in a manner which is significantly and demonstrably harmful to the character, appearance and intrinsic amenity value of the countryside. The proposal is therefore contrary to policies ST1, ST3, ST5, CP4, DM14, DM24 and DM26 of bearing fruit and the National Planning Policy Framework. Does any of those DMs cover the Rural Lanes Policy? 26. So it is covered under the DM26. Are we happy with that as a repeated reason? Okay, who's proposing that? You're proposing that, Councillor Winkler?
Propose that, then, Chair.
Oh, and the section 106 reason, which is because we haven't approved it.
Okay. Only a second.
Yeah, seconder, councillor Bonney. All those in favour, please indicate. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Those against? 1. Abstentions? 2. Yeah, that refusal is carried. You want to look at item 5? Appeals? Right, excellent. We have some good results on here. Do one of the officers normally talk us through this, or? Anybody want to say anything on any of these? Councillor Clark.
Yeah, just briefly, Chairman. Item 5.2, land off Swan Street Avenue. Very, very disappointing that the inspector came back and allowed this appeal. And it's development, I would suggest, in the countryside. Inspector's just not taken that into consideration in their decision.
Councillor Bonning.
Chair, point of order.
Councillor Hunt.
3.1.12 of the Constitution states that meetings will finish by 10 p.m. at the latest unless members present vote for the meeting to continue for another half an hour. They already did for half an hour, we've now gone past the other half an hour.
In that case, then you'd have to close the meeting. There was no proposal in time to extend them standing orders. Thank you all very much, and well done.
What?